Welcome back to My Trauma's Chronic, but I'm iconic. I'm thrilled to introduce to you Eva Lindy Woods. She's a true force of nature and is doing some incredible things in her community. Eva's a member of Youth Parliament for Peterborough, which means she gets involved in shaping policies that directly affect young people in her area. She's also a charity trustee where she volunteers her time to help make a difference in her community. Eva is also a local government member, which means she's involved in various initiatives and programs that help improve lives of people in her city. But that's not all. Eva is also a talented writer and commentator. Her writing has been featured in various publications and outlets. She's also a student of Spanish and Arabic and is passionate about learning new languages and cultures. Eva is a strong advocate for youth involvement in politics, community organisations, and is passionate about mental health and well-being. I think you'll find Eva to be incredibly inspiring and engaging. And I can't wait for you to hear all about her work and her insights.
So my name is Rosemary, and I am the CEO, director, and of My Trauma's Chronic, but I'm iconic.
Amazing. So I'm Eva. I am Peterborough's member of Youth Parliament, and I also work in local government full time with youth services, community services, and careers is kind of my main thing. And then I'm also a trustee of a community and voluntary services charity, and amongst other things. Basically, I just love community, young people, anything like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have a question. How old are you?
I am 18.
I'm 18 next month.
Amazing. I was going to say, what about you? Cool. Yeah, it's nice to speak to somebody very accomplished at such a young age. It's amazing.
Well, it's likewise. It's like I find it really hard to meet other young people who have like the same interest and like work ethic as well as drive and ambition.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah,
you meet lots of people who are really intelligent, but they might not have the time on their hands or the experience to do something with it. Or you meet people who are always working really hard, but they tend to contribute to other people's work rather than doing their own thing. It's really cool when you see someone who's managed to like break out and do their own thing like you have. It's really impressive.
Well, thank you. So I just want to talk to you through a bit about the process. So it is absolutely at your own pace. If you need a break, let me know. If you want me to speak slower or speak quicker, do let me know. And if you want to give us answers as long as like few pages, go for it. If you want to say one word answers, that's fine, because you can share as much or as little as you want. So yeah. So shall we get started?
Yeah, sounds amazing. I'm in your hands and I look forward to it.
Oh, thank you. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Eva Woods and I'm 18 years old. I'm from Peterborough, UK, not Canada, as you can probably tell from my accent. And I am a member of Youth Parliament, and that involves getting involved with local decision making, trying to connect with young people in the community. We do some national campaigns, but I also do lots of local campaigns, especially around sexual harassment and eating disorders. And I think that kind of brings me into my background. So my campaign work comes from personal experience. I went to secondary school, like hundreds of thousands of us will. And in that environment, I had experiences of sexual harassment. I can't pinpoint the exact point in my life where I would say I developed an eating disorder, but that has been with me throughout my journey. And I think my kind of direction in life is I'm very interested in solutions within the community. I think the people who face challenges are usually the ones who have the knowledge and the lived experience to build the response to it. And what people in power need to do is give them a space to share their lived experience, and give them the investment and the time and the resources to put that lived experience into solutions. So that's kind of my drive, and that's what I want to support other people to do.
I absolutely agree. Oh my God. Like pretty much everything that you said. I feel like there needs to be like a place for us individuals who have lived experiences. We have so much knowledge to give, so much ways that we know that will impact the system positively, and what needs to be removed, and what will benefit other young people or people like us in general.
Yeah, completely agree.
What inspired you to become involved in local government and charity work?
My journey to being involved in local government was not something I'd ever planned. When I was little, when I was really little, I wanted to be a singer, like lots of us do, and only some of us reach. But as I got older, I wanted to be a journalist, and I was always very passionate about sharing my opinions and trying to take a really complex issue and find a response to it that comes from analysis. So I was always I was always the kind of person who liked solutions and who liked platforming opinions. And I've always been involved in different community groups, and I came to be part of a local theatre group and my youth council in the city where I'm from. And one day, this opportunity to become a member of youth parliament was advertised, and the process for that is people across the city. It doesn't matter who you are, if you're aged 11 to 18, and I would recommend anybody listening to this, by the way, to see whether the area you're from has a youth parliament seat, because it's an incredible opportunity. But you put forward your application, and all the schools act as polling stations where students can go and vote. And one of my teachers said, I think you should do that. And I was like, no, I'm a writer, I'm a behind the scenes person. I don't go out and I always saw myself as like a second in command, not a leader. And I still kind of do. But that's how I put myself forward. And when I started being a youth MP, I realised that I love local government. I loved interacting with the different structures within it. I think local government, in terms of the impact it has on communities, has a really long way to go, communications wise especially, because young people don't know how government works, who's responsible for what, how they can make their voice heard. But I've campaigned on things over the years, like trying to get young people to vote when they're eligible, trying to make it easier for young people to vote, because it's always two-sided. It's trying to motivate young people to get involved and make sure that they've actually got the pathways to get involved, because you can't say, well, young people never actually share their voice when there isn't a platform for that. So I guess that's how I got into it. I was invited to give it a go by mentors who believed in me, which I'm very grateful to have. And since then, I've just been really invested in trying to make that accessible for everyone as much as I can.
Yeah, and it's really important to get, young children and young people to get involved in local government, as it gives them the voice and the power, to shape their communities. And it also creates a more inclusive and represented local authority. And I feel like it kind of without voices from different voices without hearing from different perspectives, it's very, very difficult to make such an informed decision that that's going to benefit everybody else. Because for example, in the podcast we have everyone and anyone who is related to trauma. So that can be from professionals to professionals by education, professionals by experience, all sorts. So we can hear everybody, and we could educate people on different perspectives, and all of these perspectives are valid, and all of them needs to be heard, especially in your local authorities, local governments, all the way up to central government.
Yeah, there's more than one way to be qualified. You can qualify through study, you can qualify through lived experience, either as somebody who's suffered trauma yourself or has lived with trauma yourself, or someone who supported others through it. There are so many ways to become a degree of an expert in a subject. And I think what decision making bodies need to get better at doing is recognizing those different methods of qualification. And if somebody, this is a key thing with young people, and I guess with anyone who doesn't come from a professional background, if you have the experience from your own life to be able to contribute a really unique perspective and a really unique solution, but what you don't have is, I don't know, maybe the communication skills, or maybe you've never managed a budget before, maybe you've never been to a corporate meeting before. The role of people who do come from that professional background isn't to say, okay, we're going to listen to you once, never tell you how we actually responded to your feedback, and then go and do our own thing anyway. We've ticked the box. Their role is to try and give you those skills to participate in those conversations. And I think what I've noticed is there's a lot of fear amongst decision makers that if you give people like young people or anyone who's not from a professional background the tools to participate themselves, it's almost like, well then, what's our job? If anybody can get involved in the decision making process, what's our job as authority figures? And your job as authority figures is to facilitate. Don't be scared of people who don't normally belong in this space coming into it. Be the ones who facilitate them in that space and make them feel comfortable. You will always have a role. There's nothing wrong with including new people.
And if you're threatened, this is probably not the right job for you, because as an authority figure, let's just say a member of parliament, for example, your job is to advocate on what your constituency believes that it needs, or what it doesn't need, or what they want. That, like, I guess in simple terms, their needs, like I just said. And you should, I feel like opinions that are constructive, not like, so like you can be constructive and critical, but to do it in a way that is healthy and easily welcomed.
Yeah.
It's like finding that balance, I feel like. And you said that you worked on like key issues such as, to do with eating disorders and you just said it. Oh my God, it just left my mind.
Sexual harassment was the other one I mentioned.
Sexual harassment, that's it. Yeah. Sorry. So to do with eating disorders and sexual harassment. So what can you talk with us like further about what you do in terms of each segment?
Definitely. So when you get elected as a youth parliament member, it's a bit disorientating at first because you've made all these promises to work on all these issues, and sometimes people come in with a really concrete plan in place, and that's amazing, but either that plan has setbacks and things don't work exactly like you thought they would, or if you're like me, I knew that I was invested in these issues and that they needed a bigger platform, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. So it took me a couple of months to figure out who was who, which decision makers are relevant for these issues, get to know things like, I don't know, lots of NHS Foundation Trust will have their governance structures, and there will be people like public health directors, and just figuring out those different names and who's who has what power. And then once I spent a bit of time and energy and tears doing that, I knew what a campaign could potentially look like. So in terms of sexual harassment, and actually just a little pluggable from me, I've just released an article about this today in my local newspaper, the Peterborough Telegraph, about this campaign. So by all means, please do read more if you're interested. But for sexual harassment...
What is it called before you continue? Sorry.
What, sorry?
The article that you wrote.
The article. I think it's called something like Youth MP's Project calls for a youth-led cultural focus on sexual harassment. That's something like it. It's a really long title. But the story is that in schools in my city, in Peterborough, it was a well-known fact that sexual harassment happened in every school, and that it was widespread, and that was a big part of our culture as young people. So things all the way down to like throwaway comments that happen every day and aren't taken seriously, but they have that cumulative and constant effect on you. So if you're told once that a comment's made about your body once, that may still have a massive effect on you, or it may be a small effect because it's happened once. But if it's happening more than once from multiple different people in multiple different occasions throughout a day, throughout a week, throughout a year, it builds up, right? And I think that's what teachers don't see within schools. They will see a really a potentially law-breaking and quote unquote serious issue, and they'll be able to report that, and they'll understand immediately how much that impact, that isolated issue, and how much trauma that would have caused for that young person. But what they don't see is the build-up. And I wanted a piece of research that showed that sort of scientifically, because it's all well and good to talk about it and talk about our lived experience, but sometimes people want data. So set about to create this data, and what I established was a peer research network. And lots of organisations around the country have done this before, where they've trained peers, so anybody with lived experience, but not necessarily a scientific or research background. They've trained them with research skills so they can go away and research within their own communities with other lived experience experts. And obviously the benefit of that is when you're talking to someone who gets you, you're more likely to, you don't have to try and find the words, you're talking to someone who's on your level. That's the benefit of peer research. So that's why I run it that way. I recruited 12 young people from 12 different schools in Peterborough, gave them that training, and they went back to their schools and they did focus groups with other students about the impact sexual harassment has in schools. And obviously all those schools turned up very different things, because some had older student bodies, some had younger student bodies. They had different communities making up schools. So some of them were very white schools, some of them weren't. But those different characteristics of the student bodies meant that sexual harassment manifested in different ways because of our age differences, our cultural differences, everything like that. And those students then presented their findings back as a report and a spoken presentation to their senior leaders in schools, so like the head and those kinds of people. And they created an action plan with the heads to use this research and the data they uncovered to change policy in school. And that happened differently in all 12. But it wasn't the easiest experience, because schools don't like talking about sexual harassment. Schools don't like talking about trauma. Schools don't like talking about anything that makes them and their students sound not perfect. And I think that's the main thing I learned from that project, that we need to get comfortable talking about the fact that things aren't perfect if we ever want to see change. And we have to have imperfection as part of our brand, because otherwise we're going to keep lying to people, and we're going to make students feel like it's not okay to be vocal about their struggles. And we're going to encourage businesses, schools, whoever it is, to brush their internal issues under the rug, because they feel like they're making themselves vulnerable by expressing the fact that they're not perfect. But actually what's more impressive to see is that commitment to constantly listening to the problems of your students or your employees or whoever, and committing to improving your business or your school for them, rather than acting like you're already perfect. Well, that's my hot take on the situation.
I feel like that's very accurate in the sense that things build up, right? You know, your mental capacity can only take so much. We are human. And according to statistics, in England and Wales, there's 1 in 5 women, that's 20%, who are sexually abused in one way or the other. That includes sexual harassment, and 4% of men who experience sexual violence in their lifetimes. And this is reported statistics. How many, God knows how many unreported cases there are. And when it comes to children and young people, the NSPCC published a child sexual abuse statistics briefing in March 2021, and the research with 2,275 people aged 11 to 17 about their experience of sexual abuse suggested about 1 in 20 children in the UK have been sexually abused.
Yeah.
And however, the latest statistics by Rape Crisis, which is also, it is a form of sexual harassment and abuse, is
1 in 6 children have been sexually abused, which is really, I don't know what to say, because it highlights the need for people to forget about what it does to their fucking organization and get their shit together, because this is a serious issue and that needs to be addressed immediately. And how are you going to address it? Not how it's going to make you look. Who cares about what it's going to make you look? You standing up for your, whether it's your employees or whether it's your young people, whether it's your adults or whomever it may be, that is much more, like you said, much more powerful to see. But like, but like, you know what I don't understand, especially schools, right, and like organizations that work with vulnerable people. I do not understand how people in with authority can go to bed at night and sleep like a baby.
Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it, to understand how somebody can not feel the weight of all those human beings in their care. And obviously, the people will explain that, especially with things like schools. We have league tables. That's the way our country works. It's terrible, but schools will be measured on certain KPIs, on certain systems of measurement, where which don't include necessarily the well-being of their students. But there's 2 ways to combat that. First of all, the well-being of your students will always affect whatever you're being measured on, and especially if you come from, it doesn't matter what kind of school you are. If you're a super high achieving grammar school, or all of our students are perfect, then your students are probably likely to be under an immense amount of stress, and their well-being is even more important. Or if you're a school which doesn't do very well in the league tables and is trying to move up and be presented less as the school I come from, if you say its name in the community, then lots of people go, it's a rough school, it's a quote unquote chabby school.
I'm only thinking of one. Is it academy?
Yeah, it is an academy. And I think schools like that, who are desperately trying to improve their image and get away from that rough image that they've been branded with, need to get better at owning it and understanding that your students are going to have lots of struggles, because if your students have been labelled as rough, then we all know full well that that's just the middle class's way of trying to ostracize and stop people from achieving their potential. Respect the fact that your students have been dealt a harder card in life, and make that part of your school identity. Make it part of your brand as a school or a business or whoever you are. The fact that your employees have had to work harder than everybody else to get where they are because of the background they come from, talking about poverty and talking about anything else they may have struggled through, and build that respect for everything they've been through that's potentially more than others into your identity. Stop trying to erase and say we're exactly the same as all these squeaky clean perfect student schools. Say we are an excellent school, but we're not squeaky clean, we're not perfect, we don't fit that mold. Actually, we are completely different, and that makes us stronger. But yeah, I've kind of veered off topic here, but that's a big thing for me. The fact that schools need to recognise that the fact that their students aren't perfect make their students even more impressive.
Yeah, and then like going on to your work about eating disorders, sexual harassment has a massive link to eating disorders. What work do you do regarding eating disorders?
So the work I do with eating disorders is all based in the curriculum. So I'm currently designing, and it's still in its consultation processes, because I'm one of those people who likes everybody to have an opinion on things and check it before it gets finished. I want lots of different partner organisations, but I've designed a curriculum in partnership with different, like we were talking earlier, different types of expertise. So nurses, charity leaders, people who have had eating disorders themselves, people who have cared for someone with an eating disorder. Lots of different people have been consulted to make this curriculum package, which is a fancy way of saying 4 PowerPoint lessons that talk about what eating disorders are, how they can affect people, who they can affect, which is obviously everybody, and what we can do about them, both in terms of supporting people to recover and on a social action level as well. How can we challenge things that are ingrained into our culture that leave us with unhealthy attitudes to food? And like you said, sexual harassment and eating disorders are very linked. I think this curriculum is directed at 12 to 14-year-olds, so sort of year 8, year 9 students here in the UK, because that was around the age that I developed my own eating disorder and had lots of friends who were having similar struggles. Of course, they're still with us now, but that was when a lot of us were grappling with it for the first time and didn't have the same coping mechanisms that we've now developed over periods of years. And I really want people to have those answers to those questions and get that vocabulary to be able to understand that what they're going through, that there is hope and there is a community of people who have experienced the same thing. I want them to come into contact with that as early as possible. And lots of people have said, is that too young to be talking to people about eating disorders or sexual harassment or anything? No, it's absolutely not. And if you think that's too young to be talking to young people about gritty things, then you have no idea what young people have to go through.
Absolutely. I definitely agree, because I'm like, babies, children, like even babies get sexually harassed.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no, like, sexual harassment and eating disorders and abuse or all of these things that people find gritty. There is no age limit to it. It's not like, okay, sorry, the law says you're 16, so I can't say these sorts of stuff. You can't, and you're 12, I can't say this sort of stuff. You're under 18. No, that's not true. That is absolutely not true. It's like, take some responsibility. And they'll be like, oh, but my husband doesn't do it. It's very, very subtle way sexual harassment work, or commenting on people's bodies or something like that. Yeah. Even saying you look good in a way that is like, oh my God, it looks like you lost a lot of weight. You look good. It's like, you don't know what somebody's going through. You don't know the impacts and how detrimental those words could be.
Definitely. And it's trying to help people understand because those things, in the same way as the accumulation of sexual harassment and those comments which seem small at surface level, but it's the way they build up and it's the way they
volumes. Are you going down on your laptop?
No. Is it not as good as it was?
Yeah, it's better now.
Oh, okay. It might have just dipped a bit. Let me know if it's not working properly. Is it okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Good.
Sorry.
No, don't worry. It's your show. Make sure it's perfect. And yeah, it's that the way that things build up over time, whether that be an incident, whatever the comment is that was made, you don't know somebody's context. And I think the earlier that people start, there's no age that's too young to help somebody understand that you should think carefully about what you say.
Yeah.
And what you can do is you can introduce new context to that as young people are growing up. You can, whilst bearing in mind that for some young people, unfortunately, they will be forced to cope with things that it's impossible to compute at such a young age, and that's just the cruelty of the world. And those young people will need to be supported on a very one-to-one level. But if you're concerned about introducing young people to scary things at a young age when it's avoidable, because obviously some people will experience those traumas at a very young age, but we wouldn't want young people to come into contact with them if they don't have to. What you can do is give them a framework to not inflict any further damage on their peers by just learning something as simple as think about that thing that you want to say before it comes out of your mouth. How could that affect somebody? And then for that slightly smaller group of young people, but even though the statistics you've just mentioned shows that the amount of very, very young people who have experienced sexual abuse is actually not as small as we might think, for that group of young people, that they may be too young for there to be an appropriate way to talk about it in PSHE lessons or whatever, but they're going to need support in their development. And they may be too young to watch a PowerPoint about sexual abuse or something like that because it will just be scary, but they will need support to work through their own experiences. And when they're older and they know how to have they're mature enough to be able to speak to other young people in the classroom setting about those experiences. It's all about context, isn't it? There is no age where it's too young to discuss different types of trauma, because some people will have experienced it at that age. It's just about when it becomes appropriate to teach that in a classroom setting, and whether the staff are qualified to facilitate that, because obviously PSHE, it's a fine line to walk, isn't it? You have to talk about things and you have to make young people aware that it's okay to speak to somebody if that's familiar to you. But if we talk about everything in a classroom setting, teachers aren't going to be trained to have that conversation in a way where everybody in that room can be kept safe. And if somebody has experienced the subject matter of that lesson, the teacher may unintentionally do them further damage by using the wrong language, or somebody else in the room.
Mainstream.
Definitely, especially when there's so many different needs of young people to balance at the same time. But that's why we need things like youth workers. We need things like we need a joined up approach in terms of healthcare and social care, so that those young people who have more complex needs and have more complex traumas aren't relying on getting all the support they need from a school, or if they are getting it from a school, because they are a great one-stop shop, then those resources are available in the school.
And one thing that I don't understand is people don't, I need to think about how it fits. What I don't understand is when people think there's an age limit. Like you said, it's all about context. It doesn't have to be like, okay, these are like different forms of sexual abuse and this is what it could look like. It could be like, okay, like I know this like lady who has like 2 sons. I don't know her personally. I see her on social media, and she educates her son. She's I don't know, she speaks Arabic. I think she's from Lebanon. But yeah, she has 2 sons, and she'll be like, hey, if somebody touches you there, like on a doll, is that good? They touch you there, is it good? Like that's like, you can do that in a setting, in a small groups, in reception, in nursery, maybe in 1.
Yeah.
And you say, if somebody touches you there, it's not nice. You're not going to be like, it's inappropriate. You're going to be like, it's not nice. You say no.
Yeah.
You say,
or if that happened, you say no, to keep, so they've got the resources to keep themselves safe in that situation. They can make it stop, and also making sure everybody has someone to tell. So if that happens to you, who do you tell? If somebody's educating young people around that, then they're probably also in a position to help them or be taught or talk to. But obviously for some young people, that won't be their parents, that won't be their teachers. But everybody's different situation is different. Their home may be their safe space, somewhere else may be their safe space. But every young person needs some kind of safe space. Every person needs some kind of safe space. Not all of ours will be the same, but it's really important making sure that everybody, whether they appear to be vulnerable or not, has someone to go to and knows who they would go to. So if that happens to you, if this situation happens to you, what do you do? Who do you tell? And just making sure that in a non-scary way, that's not okay.
yeah. And it's saying to them is like, if someone, it's not going to be like, if somebody does a very specific situation, sometimes like secondary schools may do that. And I'm like, it's triggering and re-traumatizing for some. And people don't need to have like specific intense scenario situations to understand the depths of sexual harassment, abuse, and stuff like that. And you know, linking eating disorders and sexual abuse. 30% of people who go through sexual abuse or have a history of it, 30% of them have an eating disorder.
Interesting. Yeah,
That is high. That is really, really high.
nearly 1 in 3, isn't it? It's pretty big. I think, and I think from my perspective, the link between them, a lot of it comes through the way that experiencing sexual harassment or sexual abuse makes you view your body differently, and you have a different relationship with your body. I think a lot of my experiences were around those sort of I guess some people will call it bullying, but it's sexualized and gender based. But when people are making constant comments about your body, that went from being things like, as a trajectory for me, being told, I don't know, comments about your bum or your stomach or anything like that, just in the context of young people messing around in a school, that then goes to, okay, I'm constantly thinking about how I look and how others perceive me and whether I'm attractive, to I'm now going to pursue an obsessive lifestyle that really affects my quality of life. And it starts off from not a legitimate reason, of course, but a rational reason. I want people to think better of me because, and therefore, I'm going to change myself. And then, obviously, one of the impacts of eating disorders is it gets increasingly irrational as you go through. So for me, it began being about how I looked and how others treated me, and especially how boys in my school treated me. I just wanted it to stop. And then it ended up being, it had absolutely, the boys, thank the Lord, matured and started being a bit more respectful and appropriate, but that didn't matter because you're already in a grip of eating disorder.
And it's like, and people don't understand it. It's like when it comes to eating disorders, and when there's a link to, like, sexual harassment or abuse, they're like, what does this have to do with it? It could just be a coincidence. Number one, 30% cannot be a coincidence. And also, it's like people fail to understand. It is a complex topic. It is, but you don't need a complex explanation to understand the link.
Yeah.
It's thought that people with eating disorders may have use it as an attempt to gain a sense of power and control over their bodies,
Yeah.
or to deal with the residual stress from abuse. And how do you manage all these different responsibilities?
I think sometimes it's important when you're doing any kind of work where you may come into contact with re-traumatizing things, or it may just be stressful for you or difficult or time consuming, to come back to the lived experience that led you there. And I think that's one of the main things for me. I mean, there's practical time management, but there's also just having the drive to maybe work at all hours, which isn't healthy or sustainable, but sometimes you need to do it just to get something over the line. It's occasionally I will read somebody else's story who sounds like they're going through something that I was going through when I was younger, or I'll speak to somebody who's maybe older than me and has a bit more wisdom on, is able to reflect better than I am, and then it sort of recenters you and it reminds you why you do this. So I would say to anybody who has taken on a form of work that is difficult for them, either emotionally, physically, in any way, to do things that remind you why you did it in the first place, whether that's talking to people or maybe reflecting on your own story. And then in terms of just managing your time, I think it's always easier to do when people respect quite how much you've got on your plate. So as young people, we'll always struggle because we'll be expected to, I don't know, maybe do an hour of homework and then spend the rest of the evening doing God knows what. But some of us have more to juggle than others, like caring responsibilities or jobs, or depending on what our background is. And some of us will just have lots of things professionally on our plate to deal with, education and whatever else we've got involved with. And I think we can do our best to communicate to people, I am really busy. You are going to need to be patient with me and manage your expectations. And then we can do our best to keep our own houses in order and keep up with things and rest so that we can continue to be our best selves. But also, like with everything, you've got to flip it a bit, and there's onus and responsibility on other people to give us the respect we deserve. If you see somebody as somebody who's in a position of power and think they are impressive, they have lots on their plate, they're always making change, that's practical. You can't just admire someone, you have to actually then accommodate them and respect them, and know that sometimes they will tell you, I can't do that, I can't meet that deadline, I can't take on an extra piece of work, and you shouldn't push them. So it's a two-way thing, looking after yourself, remembering why you bothered in the first place, and then surrounding yourself with people who will respect you as an impressive person who is also a human being and only can bear so much.
That is so true. I feel like, especially in schools and sixth form, college, they're like, okay, I'm setting this and it needs to be done regardless. And it's like, even if people, didn't have a job, like some of them have a job as a young carer, they might be looking after their loved ones, their friends, their families who are going through a period of difficulty or have been for a long time. And it's having that understanding. I feel like that's what society feels the most, is just stop, listen, and validate and understand.
Yeah. And especially recognizing that mental health struggles are, they do take away from your capacity, and that is very real. So I'll talk about sort of me back then and me now, how I've struggled with all of this, and now I'm here doing work around it. But I'm not a perfect recovered person. I struggle a lot with depression, and it doesn't go away. You're dealing with mental health is lifelong. And I think what I struggle to explain to people, especially if you take on a lot and then all of a sudden your mental health context changes and you're not able to deliver to the same standards because of fatigue or because of loss of energy, or it's harder to remind yourself about the things you care about, you stop caring about anything at all. It's really hard to communicate that to people. So if you do struggle with depression, or I guess some people call it burnout, and I feel like it's more than that, that's kind of a word that's lost its meaning, but if you do feel yourself losing just through something which is frustratingly not physically visible, but it is debilitating for you. Some people don't understand that, but you are completely valid. And I would suggest that you try and speak to other people who understand that and relate to that, because your boss might not, your teachers might not, they might not understand what it's like to, for a reason that you don't understand, be unable to get out of bed. Some people will never get that, and some people will take opportunities away from you, and that's not fair. But have hope that when you recover, you'll be in a position to fight for better for either yourself in the future or other people who go through that, and talk to other people who get it, because guaranteed there will be someone a text message away, or an Instagram story away, or if you're more private, just a friend who knows what it's like to not be able to get up some days for a reason that nobody else can see.
And I feel like you've explained some of your struggles getting out of bed and stuff like that, and it's like, and even if you do nothing else the rest of the day, it's like getting out of bed, I've done something that was challenging, I've achieved that, and giving yourself credit. I feel like people don't give themselves credit that much. And I feel like, like you said, with balancing the work, like my every day is like my days are packed with stuff to do back to back. And, if I cancel, it's rare. And it's just like really, really frustrating when I have to, like, we've had to rearrange a few times as well.
Yeah, haven't we?
Yeah. And it's like, and we both respect, even without saying it, that you have the capacity. If you can't do it, you can't do it. And if I don't have the capacity, I can't do it. And I feel like if two young people can understand that, I do not see why someone who's an adult, who's a member of the race, humans, can't understand it. I find it really unusual and surprising.
Yeah, definitely. I guess that gives us hope for the future, right? The fact that if we've managed to get the hang of these good work practices and good life practices as well at such a young age, then hopefully our generation will be able to sort of set an example from below. And I think that's that's one of the reasons why, coming back to what we were saying right at the start, why people feel uncomfortable letting young people or anybody else who's disenfranchised into their workplaces, because they know that we have a different way of working. And I feel like some people should fear that less, because some of our work practices on will have a positive impact. That level of respect and I mean, I know there's multiple sides to youth culture, right? Like we've got all this healthy respect for boundaries going on, and we've also got hustle culture alongside it. And some of us switch in between, right? I have what I say to others is completely different to what I say to myself internally. I'll have some days where I'll be like, do you know what? I can only do so much, and I'm going to communicate my availability. And some days I'll be like, in my head, yeah, I'm a hustler, I do this, I do that, and I fill my day and I'm always on the move. And we'll shift between those cultures, and some of them are healthier than others, but we have so much to offer the world of work. And it drives me mental when people say that young people are lazy, because I don't know whether this is just the community
And
I'm
we do
from.
like, and those people, we do like 10 times more than those people as well.
Yeah,
And they're like, oh, what do you do? And they get really impressed. I'm like, there's no need to be impressed. You like,
yeah,
it's like, it's not even impressed. That's inaccurate. That's not the word. They use that word, but what they mean is, oh, so you don't do like, stay in bed all day, do nothing. That's what they're trying to
yeah.
say. Not impressed. Impressed is different.
It
It's like,
almost becomes awkward, doesn't it, after that? Like, if you're talking to someone and they say, that's really impressive, the whole conversation changes tone, because they realize that. I think that's when that intimidation and that feeling threatened sets in, because they start to get a bit off with you then, because they're like,
have
oh, I'm
education.
talking to someone experienced young person, I'm talking to a responsible professional, and I'm not in the position of power I thought I was.
And especially, I feel like when you are in a managerial position, I don't know if you are, but like when people, especially people that try to come on the podcast, when they're being absolutely insolent, and then later when we like introducing ourselves or we do an induction and we talk, and they're like, oh, I didn't expect you to be this young. People think I'm in my mid-20s, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm just
And
like,
it doesn't help on social media, does it? Because sometimes, and I guess it's not that anybody lies about their age or anything like that, but sometimes if you present yourself in a very professional capacity, and then sometimes people genuinely just look older than they are, don't they? And then yeah, if you're not how somebody expects you, and then you just see like the change in their face, or like sometimes it comes mid conversation, doesn't it, when you tell them something new about yourself, or you I don't know if you, because some people think that like talking about anything that's personal and not strictly corporate is inappropriate for professional discussions, when actually sometimes it's completely irrelevant to the conversation. So you'll talk about another area of your life which is actually very relevant to this conversation, and you just see their face change, and they're like, I can't believe you're talking about that in a work meeting. And it's just like,
that's what I do. Like I have a job with Merton. Are you aware of Merton?
No, I'm
The
not.
local authority. So it's like a
Right.
area. Because wait, are you from Yorkshire?
No, I'm from Cambridgeshire, Peterborough.
Oh, okay. Wait, is I don't know where I got that from.
I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, no, I wasn't familiar, but cool.
But like for example, Birmingham, like they have like it's all like one thing.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas in London, we have all our different boroughs,
Yeah.
and each of them have their own local government.
Right.
So that's the one that I'm from, and I'm a looked after child, so I'm in care. I'm a soon-to-be care leaver. I and I have a history of absolute, like, I've gone through physical, emotional, and verbal and sexual abuse, and I'm like, that's what makes me unique. My perspective's unique. My insights to be invaluable.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, I'm talking about my own personal life. Yes, I'm talking about my experiences, because that's what I got hired for. This is why I joined this role. This is why I, did all the all of these things to get this job, so I can help other people like me. Yes, is it? I don't. I feel like it's like I feel like you can share your personal life. It's not unprofessional, and I think by you nodding your head, I think you agree as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not like my manager and I are arguing over our boyfriends. Be like, oh my god, my boyfriend's way better than you. Like, it's not relevant.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think as young people as well, we understand that there's like boundaries in place as well. It's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, our boyfriend, we're talking about this because it's relevant to the job. And
Yeah.
and I feel like as young people, we have to spell things out a bit more. Be like, I'm doing this because of this, this, this. And you don't have to explain this to them. I'm like, but I feel like it's also that, like, I don't want to be like, I don't want to be classed as, for young people. Oh my god, young people are so rude. Be like,
Yeah.
because like what you can really say is, no, you're not my line manager, and I do not have to report back to you.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes a while to get that kind of confidence, but sometimes it's um like I always say, like, don't burn bridges, but that's not always applicable. Like, try and cultivate a good relationship with everybody you meet until you get to a stage where you know that you're not going to gain anything from them and they're not giving you this. Just match respect levels. It's not about being rude, is it? As if somebody's not giving you the respect you deserve, the respectful thing to do is to set a professional example. And it's ironic because what they think they're doing is trying to make you feel uncomfortable because you haven't been meeting their standards. But what you're actually doing is saying, no, these are the standards we should both be meeting, respect. And if I'm going to have to set that example, so be it. And I'm not usually like this in professional conversations. I come across very like shy, and I let people take up more space than me. But when I get comfortable, people know about it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and I feel like being, the CEO and the director of My Children's Chronic, My Chronic, is if I this is a sort of person I am in general. I do not, like, I don't put up with bullshit. I do not put up with it. And I'm like this in my personal life. I'm like this in my work life. I'm like this. And when like somebody wants to be like interested on being on the podcast, but if you talk to me in a certain way, I'll be like, sorry, I do not want to proceed any further. Because the thing is, like, the relationship, sometimes my editor is involved in, like being in the group chat if there's a group chat made, but he's not going to respond or reply to any of these messages, but he can see everything that's going on. And I'm like, if in any time that you want to get in contact with my editor because you can't get immediate contact of me, if you're going to speak to me like this, how are you going to be with my editor? And it's like, respect is not that hard to do. Like, I'll be very, very, like, in my personal life, I'll be very, very, very respectful until you lose my respect. But in your work life, you can't really be like that. You can say it in a very formal way, but it just doesn't have the same, I knocked on the thing.
No, exactly. Sometimes you wish, and I guess as people, you're in a managerial position of responsibility now, But when you get into other positions where maybe you have a large staff who you're responsible for, I think that's when it becomes more your responsibility to occasionally be very firm with people when you've got other people to protect. Like if you're just looking after yourself, then sometimes all it takes is cutting someone off and refusing to engage with them professionally anymore because they're not treating you with respect as a colleague. But I guess when you're responsible for other people, it is even more important to try and set boundaries on their behalf. Like you were saying about your editor, if somebody talks to you like that, how are they going to talk to somebody when you're not available? I think when I was working on my sexual harassment project, it's not a direct parallel, but when we have the 12 peer researchers on our team who are all students in local schools, I felt like I had to take even more responsibility for that project because I knew that there was other people who were benefiting from it, hopefully. And I guess when you do anything, even with your listeners here, it makes you take even more pride in your work because you know how many people it's impacting, but it also means you're even more protective of it. And if somebody disrespects that or oversteps boundaries, the more you have to lose, the firmer you're going to have to be in defense of what you've built.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm a very protective person, like naturally. So I'm like, and it's like, if we're in real life, I'll be like, oh, but I can't be like that. And even my personal life, I can't be like, oh, like all the time. And sometimes it just slips out, and I'm like, can't regulate my emotions. Like, it's like trying to find a way where and I feel like when you're a young person, especially, I feel like when I say young person, anyone under the age of 30, they like, I feel like old people see like young people 30 and under, and professionalism is from 30 and under, from my experiences.
Definitely. Yeah. Is anyone who experiences ageism because of how young their age is? I feel like and I don't know, I feel like this is longer for women than it is for men. Longer for men than it is for women. I feel like there's a bracket in the professional world where you're kind of immune from ageism, and then anyone beyond that or lower than that experiences a lot more. I feel like men are respected younger and are maintain that respect for longer before they start being seen as an old man who's past his time. But I feel like for women, you have to be pretty senior before anybody gives you any kind of respect.
Yeah, very, very, very top.
Yeah, and then as soon as you hit sort of, I reckon it's about 45, 50, people start again seeing you as towards the end of your career. And if you're a parent, I mean, obviously anybody who is a parent can take time out of their career to focus on their family, but especially women, you never get that sort of sweet spot where you're being taken seriously because people will value your professional work less because it's sort of this culture of you have to give absolutely everything for your job to be seen as part of the team and of any value. And if anybody has kind of split priorities between their work life and their home life, you're off the team and you're not a part of the culture. I feel like there's ageism, and then also in terms of gender, I feel like it is so much harder for women to get to a stage where they are just automatically respected. And I don't know whether that will be different for our generation. I hope it is. I hope this sort of professional culture of respect that we're developing breaks down some of those things as well.
I feel like the one thing is, I feel like how am I gonna say this? I feel like I hate it. It's not I don't hate it. That's the wrong word. I don't like it when people come into interviews because of their previous like experiences, saying they automatically say, "I know, I just came out of university, but like give me a chance." I'm like, I'm gonna give you a chance because your education means absolutely nothing to me. Yes, it does contribute to how competent you could potentially be, but you could be educated and shit at your job. You can be like
uneducated in that field of work, but be the best person for the job. And yeah, I think we digress, but yeah.
I know, but it is all related, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of.
Sorry,
Sorry,
continue.
go for it. Yeah, I was
Go
just
for
thinking, it's all in the professional world.
it.
Everything's linked. The idea that there's such tight boundary around what's considered professional, and it takes people like yourself to start their own businesses and their own organizations at a young age when they still got all of the rawness of being a disenfranchised person, and some of those identities we hold will carry with us throughout our lives. Some things like age we grow out of, but there will be other identities we hold which mean we are offered less power, which will stick with us. And it takes somebody being close to that, also being in a position of leadership, to redefine what we see as professional. And like I said, my day job's in careers, and there's nothing that I am more passionate about than helping young people go into the workforce knowing what good employers actually value isn't necessarily what's on paper. It's the things that will make you unique, and some of those things won't be branded as professional, but like you said with your story, that's what makes you the right person to be on a team, because that is what has molded the way you think. And some of it's not, some of it's gritty, some of it is unprofessional, quote unquote, all of this if you're not watching, but that is what has made your brain the way it is, and that's why people will want you in their team.
Yeah. And yeah, that's so true. Like, I have literally nothing to say because you've explained it so perfectly. Thank you. What advice would you give to like young people our age who are interested in getting involved in local government and politics?
I would say figure out what's important to you first or alongside, because it will be so much easier to deal with the graft of all the hard work when you know why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And also, people don't, it's the same with interviews or any kind of opportunity you get as a young person to shine. A lot of the time, you only get one shot, and that shot is very short. So, develop your ability to talk about the things that you're passionate about, because what's going to really carry you through your professional journey is your ability to elevate a pitch yourself and what's important to you, because people aren't going to give you a very long chance, but as soon as you've got your chance and you've started moving up that ladder, you'll get more and more opportunities. Try and find yourself a mentor. Try and find yourself somebody who is in a more senior position than you and has a longer experience. And they don't have to be professional or in the field you want to go into. They can be anybody who's invested in your growth and has a bit of knowledge and wisdom to offer you. And let that person be the person who you go back to when you've fallen down, or you go back to for advice, or especially it's helpful if there's somebody with connections. And if you're coming from a background where your family isn't a family who can say, oh, I know a guy, use any other links you have in your life to try and find somebody who is going to be that person, because it's not right, but that is how most people get somewhere. For me, it's from different community organisations I was part of, and like I said, I joined a theatre group. There was somebody who ran that theatre group who has been incredible in terms of the opportunity she has pointed me towards. So it may not come through your family and it may not be handed to you on a silver plate like it is for some people, but try and find yourself somebody who knows a guy, because it will help. And in terms of local government specifically, look into things like youth parliament and youth councils. And I think don't be afraid to be a public figure. Like we've obviously grown up around influencers, right, as young people. And I think being a public figure isn't the way it's often presented to us. Anybody who tries to make a name for themselves and tries to build their platform from scratch is going to have to deal with a bit of visibility, and that's going to be hard if you carry a lot of trauma with you, having some of that on display sometimes. And a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have done an interview like this where I talk a bit about my own life, because I would have thought people are going to see me differently and respect me less because of all the things you just talked about. But get comfortable with the fact that the more people come to know you and the bigger an impact you come to make, some of the parts of yourself you'd rather keep private might have to become public. And make sure you've got the support network around you to help you with that, because people will put you under scrutiny, people will make your life hard, and you've just got to make sure that you keep your loved ones close and you keep people, no matter how far away from you they are physically, who know where you're coming from and have the same lived experience as you, close.
I agree, especially when you're young. Like, I feel like they would do anything to like bring you like down, whether it's your past, whether it's, you know, what they see as unprofessional, or that your life choices. And it's usually something that has nothing to do with your work or your capability of performing your role well. What are some of the key skills and qualities that young people need in order to be effective advocates for their communities? What do you think?
Right. To be an effective advocate, you need to be plugged in with your community. So your network is very important. Make sure you're speaking to people and maintaining your friendships, and talking to people across the community, because to be an effective advocate you have to understand the issues, and some of it will be issues that you share and some of it will be things you haven't experienced yourself. And make sure I think communication skills are the most key thing. Knowing how you can present a piece of information in a way that somebody who can't relate to it can understand. Because if you're talking decision makers about young people's issues or about any issues that they may not have lived experience of, you have to be able to help them understand. I love a good metaphor or a good simile to try and explain something to somebody, especially in the context of mental health. If you're trying to explain to somebody something that's going on in your head, I used to have this thing called the boardroom analogy when I was in eating disorder treatment, and I try and explain what it was like to have all the different voices coming at you in your head, and then the eating disorder talking as well. And I say there's like the chair of this meeting, who is my true highest self and is my actual personality. And then there's all these other people in this meeting shouting who are worried about different things. And then there's this horrible guy over on the other side of the table, and that's the eating disorder. And they're trying to override the chair of the meeting. They're trying to override my true self. And what my chair of the meeting needs to do is kick that obnoxious person off the team, fire them, and get them out of the meeting. And like, that probably made no sense to the poor nurse who was talking to me, but that's how I could articulate the kind of conversations I was having in my head. And it's things like that. Find whatever works for you to be able to communicate quite complex ideas to somebody who doesn't relate. And know how people get their information. So I wrote a newspaper article this morning, and some people will read that and some people won't. Other young people will probably not read that because they don't read online newspapers in the same way as, I don't know, maybe teachers do. So if you want to be a good advocate, know where different people get different information from and try and use all those networks well. So a podcast, young people are going to listen to that. Decision makers, activists going to listen to that. All sorts of people listen to podcasts. It's great. It ticks a lot of boxes. But if you really want to get into certain communities, there'll be certain things that just work for people. So if you want to talk to, I don't know, who's a hard to reach group? If you want to talk to young people who don't have phones yet, then you're probably going to have to network with their parents, go into schools, go into care clubs, whatever. Understand where the people you want to build a relationship with spend their time and energy. There's a lot of analysis involved in advocacy, but that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, definitely. To be effective, like, you know, advocates for your community, I think as young people, you need, like you said, I want to, like, we might have like some common feedback, but like effective communication, active listening, critical thinking, that's really important, and problem solving skills. And active listening,
Mm.
I guess in a way it could be seen as like literally actively listening, but like you said, looking at newspapers, looking at looking at what's happening around the world is a key way of actively listening.
Mm.
Like you listen to the words, you're not just reading them and nothing's processing. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And understanding context and what key issues are, so that when you're trying to make change or you're trying to start something new, sometimes there are better times than others, and there's stuff you can jump off the back of. So it would have been a lot harder to run a sexual harassment project, for example, before 2021, when we saw things like Everyone's Invited, and there was a big sort of media outrage around sexual harassment in schools. Now, if you talk about it, people will go, oh, yeah, that. But if you talked about it before, there would be lots of people who had never considered it. And sometimes it's a good thing. So sometimes if there's a media campaign you can jump on the back of, or with youth services, for example, sometimes there's bits of funding that come out. So it's a lot of right place, right time. And I think the general election next year might have a big impact, because if we see a change of government, or even if we just see a regeneration of the same government, there's going to be different investment in different places. There's going to be different key agendas, whatever the political parties decide to base their campaigns on. So obviously, some of that will probably have a negative effect on the young community and some of our communities because of the kind of things politicians like to say. But some of it may be positive. If someone says, I don't know, we see a revamp of education, and that's something we can jump off the back of. So follow news, follow context, because sometimes there will be a right place, right time kind of opportunity that you can jump on the back of. And part of being a good advocate or a good innovator, good in business, is being able to spot opportunities and react quickly.
That's that. And it's I feel like it's by I agree, by harnessing these skills and qualities, we can raise awareness, we can mobilize others and bring positive changes in our communities. And one thing that we've looked at, we haven't looked at, but links to all of this, is the role of language learning, cultural exchanges in promoting understanding and cooperation between different communities. And I think that is just such a massive way of, I feel like, I feel like language learning and cultural exchange plays such a crucial role in promoting understanding and cooperation between different communities. Even though Peterborough and Merton is in the same borough, the culture will be different in its way. For especially in the UK, if you go 10 minutes down the road, the culture is going to be so different.
Yeah.
How it was 10 minutes ago. And I think we can, by learning each other's languages or learning about other people's cultures, we can communicate more effectively and bridge cultural gaps. And I feel like with this, I feel like this is a quality and understanding that people need, because it enhances the ability to be empathetic, appreciate diversity, and build stronger relationships. And I feel like it's a wonderful way to foster unity and cooperation, not just locally or regionally, but globally as well.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes learning someone's language or something like that, it shows an interest, and it makes it, especially in the UK, where we're moving away from this assimilationist idea that there is a perfect culture that everyone should be trying to be part of, into more of a we're very proud of the fact that we have a diversity of cultures, and especially in London. But Peterborough is a small city, but it's got a lot of diversity. And it's the same. You could walk 10 minutes down the road and you'd feel like you're in a different country. I was just coming to visit Peterborough. If you never have, I love it here. Very attached to my city. And we're getting to a stage here where we're accepting that we don't want everybody to mold into this sort of sludge where it doesn't have an identity anymore, and more celebrating the fact that we all are very different, and trying to it's like uniting through difference kind of idea, that we're going to take an interest in each other, and if we are proud of who we are, then we can spot more links and similarities between it. It's almost like when you're writing an essay comparing two poems or something like that, for anyone who's had the joy of doing GCSE English literature. Yeah, well, you pick them both apart in intense detail, don't you, and annotate them. And only when you've looked at them in intense detail as individuals can you then spot the links between them in comparison and in unison. So that's something we can do with each other in our different cultures as well. Be really proud of who we are and cultivate who we are. And then when we go to meet others who are different, the similarities will stand out more because we've really taken the time to know ourselves.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And you do amazing thing by learning both Spanish and Arabic. How does your study of Spanish and Arabic fit into, your job right now, in the work that you do within the communities, like not just in local government, but in the being a charity trustee? And what do you hope to achieve through your language studies for the communities that you work with?
Yeah,
Can I say that again?
of course.
Because I'm like, I just said this in a really strange way. I was like, that's so long. Like, how does your studies, of Spanish and Arabic fit into your role as a charity trustee, as well as working in the local government? And what do you hope to achieve using your language studies for the community? Much better.
Okay, so I started studying languages. I can't remember why Spanish and Arabic. I really can't. I get asked that all the time, and I'm like, I don't know. I vibed with them. I wish I had a really cool story about how I stumbled upon. Yeah, because my heritage is German, so God knows why I didn't pick German. I just didn't vibe with German. I liked Spanish, but anyways, yeah. So I started learning languages when I wanted to be a journalist, because I wanted to be like a foreign correspondent. I wanted to exactly like we were just saying about bridging identities. I wanted to try and I wanted to be the person who investigated problems on a community level, stories on a community level, globally and also locally as well, to try and put something which we see as completely different and external to us through a lens that we can understand and relate to. And I think as like I was saying earlier, I stumbled across local government and then realised that I was obsessed with it. As I kind of came to grips with the fact that my career ambitions had changed, I think coming from a place like Peterborough helps, because like I said, we are very diverse and we do have lots of different communities here, so I can use my different languages here and see how that links to representation in government. So if I want to go and talk to different communities in the city, English isn't the most accessible way to do that for some people, and you are always going to need translators to make everybody feel represented. But it's more than translators play a really important part in trying to get things absolutely perfect, but we need on a larger scale to be able to understand each other. We can have this core group of people who professionally dig right into the tiny details of every single word, but everybody should be able to understand on a broader scale other languages to make it so we can all communicate with each other. And obviously language is so linked to culture as well, because there are words which don't have an equivalent in other languages, obviously, because they're tied to a cultural practice or a piece of history. That's what I'm interested in. Things like idioms, like expressions. Like in Spanish, there are so many idioms that have reference to milk in them. And I don't know exactly the story behind that, but I just think that that's one interesting example of the fact that like a food item can show up lots as in different ways of speaking in a language, because that's just part of the culture. That sounds really strange, to be honest. I don't know why I chose that example, but idioms are fascinating. And I think in terms of charity work, so the charity that I'm a trustee for is PCBS, the Peterborough Council for Voluntary Services, and they are like a charity that supports charities. So their job is to sort of upskill and provide resources to other charities so that they can do their really specialized work. And I think that's similar to the community's perspective and the language's perspective, because the idea of being able, respecting diversity and not wanting everybody to be the same, if we want to cherish that in our society and have different communities that are different, maintain the fact that 10 minutes down the road there's a completely different world, those different worlds are going to need very different services. The doctor's practice is going to look different. The food bank's going to look different. The things that that community needs to thrive, from a local government perspective, are going to look different. And what a charity like PCBS does is provides the skills and the resources that those charities that have grown directly out of the community and know their needs really well, to give the resources to have sort of the professional support that they need. It goes back to what we were saying right at the beginning about what the role of decision makers is to give a platform to lived experience experts. What I do in my charity work and in my charity leadership is recognize that only people who come from those communities will actually understand them, and the best thing we can do professionally is give those lived experience experts everything they need.
Definitely. What are like some of the most effective ways to engage, other groups of people, especially young people, in the political process? And how can we ensure that their voices are heard? And I'm going to say that again, sorry. I'm just thinking of the question as I'm saying it. What are some of the most effective ways to engage young people in the political process? And how can we ensure that their voices are heard and their concerns are addressed like they should be?
I think we have to demystify the political process. So I do a lot of work around trying to encourage people to vote, especially in the local elections, because I don't think lots of people understand the difference between local government and central government and what people have their controls over. And obviously working in local government, I get lots of people, I get friends saying to me as jokes, can you cancel my council tax? And I'll say jokingly, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. But I also get people saying, can you change the prime minister? And I'm like, no. Firstly, because I can't change the prime minister just because I work for the government, and secondly, because that's central government and I work locally. And I think young people don't vote in the local elections because they're like, well, I know who the prime minister is. I might know who the chancellor is. I know what Labour and the Tories are, but what's a councillor? What do they do? So we need to demystify the process and help young people understand who's responsible for what. So that when they're engaging in democracy, they know what that vote has an impact on. They know that if I vote in a local election, that's not going to impact who the prime minister is directly, but it's going to impact who the person who represents the 100 or so people in my ward is, and that I might vote for a completely different party to who I vote for on a national scale, because actually local elections, in my view, are a lot about the individual person who's representing you, and sometimes you might vote outside your party loyalty because you know that that councillor is a really good advocate. And it's trying to explain things like that to young people, and making it, again, on the flip side, there's an accessibility thing. I will go on and on about voter ID. Why are people making it more difficult to vote when you already can't get large groups of the population to vote is beyond me. So I think another thing to get young people engaged in democracy and decision making is to bring democracy to them. And voter ID is its whole own debate. I recognise that, but it's things like that that add another layer to the process. And it just makes it seem like for groups of the population who already find it difficult to engage in democracy, you've just made it more difficult. So we can do all we can to encourage participation in our communities and do the research to find out actually what is stopping them. Is it because they don't understand it? Is it because they don't have time to go to a polling booth and vote? And then also on the flip side, once we know that information, we know what's stopping them, make decision makers act on it.
And I feel like, especially as it from a looked after child and soon to be care leaver perspective, I agree it does bridge more of a gap. And they're like, and also with this whole COVID thing, it's now like, okay, so do you want me to vote in 3-4 years time when I finally get my passport or my provisional, or what sort of pace do you want me to go to? And a lot of what's it called? A lot of young people in care do not have identification. And even care leavers, the local authority are obliged to give you request. Let me re-say that. The local authorities are required to give you copies of your documents, because the government could do that and they could request for it or ask for one. But they do, and it could be for various reasons. And like children in care and care leavers, like the likelihood of them having ID is not that likely, and they may not even have it for a variety of reasons, such as lack of stable housing, limited support systems, challenges in accessing necessary resources. And I feel like it's important to address this issue and ensure that they have the proper identifications if we're going to put that sort of stuff in place. Like,
Yeah.
So, but I guess identification is such a barrier. I feel like if you know I know there's fraud that happens, but if you don't know your national insurance number, I get for national insurance because that's taxes and legal, like stuff to do with money. But I feel like, actually, I hope my editor just takes this whole thing out. I'm waffling. It's near my medication time. I have ADHD, and the ADHD is ADHD.
Yes, definitely. No, I think I get what you're saying though. I think if you're going to change the rules, you've got to think about who's that's going to impact. And it didn't feel like that was done. There was a little bit of a conversation about old people when that was it. And it's just like not good enough. If you're going to change the goalposts, you have to think about who that's going to impact.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like, this is very controversial, but I feel like with the current, they're like, ooh, interesting.
No.
I feel like when it comes to identification, I feel like this had nothing to do with identification. I don't remember what I was going to say. What were we talking about?
We were talking about
controversial stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like why majority of people in central government do not care that young people do not have the opportunity to vote is because their demographic that vote for them are older people.
Yeah.
Older and older
exactly.
people. So they're like, we're going to get those easy votes in.
Yeah. And it's not going to work like that for long because the population will change and they're going to have to face up for it soon. And the more of us are clued up to the fact that we've been intentionally excluded from the voting process, the less likely we are to trust them when we do get to vote. So it's just like, stop delaying it, include people. That's great. Just respect our views. But no, I think it's important for young people to be cynical when it comes to politics. And it's important for us to have those controversial thoughts sometimes because you can never be surprised, can you? The kind of we've been let down so much throughout COVID, throughout our
You say that louder
education.
for the people at the back of the room. Yes.
We have been absolutely abandoned, and I think we do have to build our cynicism and think that there are lots of people in power at the moment who absolutely don't care about us, but there are people who do, and we've got to find them, and when we are able to, we've got to vote for them, because we do have some platforms to make change, not enough, but some. And it's my job, and it's everybody else who works for local government or cares about its job, to show us how to use them and build more where we can. It's a community effort, and I am hopeful that things will improve.
I feel like I'm just going to search this up of the ratio, how many adults in the UK and how many children and young people in the UK. Oh my gosh. I feel like the ratios are going to be not that drastic. I feel like it's going to be quite similar.
Yeah, our population demographics is so interesting, isn't it? Because we've got an aging population, but I guess in places, in cities, I mean, I know Peterborough is not London, but in terms of like the population, there are some similarities. We're we are a young city, and I think yeah, demographically, things are going to have to change if we want to properly represent the population. We can't have a government who look like our current government saying that they're truly representative of the British people, especially in terms of social class, because people will talk about, yeah, I came from a very normal family. I came from a very normal background. People are very proud of the fact that they haven't come from rich families, which is great. But if you live a middle class lifestyle now, then that doesn't mean that you're fully in touch with where you've come from. So it's like, it's amazing that people are proud of their working class backgrounds in positions of power now, but retain some contact with them. Don't just say, I've come from this and now I do this. Yeah, I won't bang on about the Prime Minister, but perfect example.
You can say that again. But when it suits him, he likes to say, oh my God, my father and mother were NHS pharmacists. I'm like, this is still, I feel like, and I don't understand when people do not see, like, further education, I think, if people want to pursue it, it should be basic right. Education is a basic right. But like, further education in many ways is a privilege. And it's like, because some people, they have the academics, the knowledge, the like adulting skills to be able to, go away to university and do it. But can they? They don't go. Some people don't go to universities because even though the UK gives out loans and it may not cost as much as American universities, it's still a lot. Like for I'm sure for the Prime Minister, it will be £10,000 is, spare change, but £10,000 is a lot. If like some people, their mindset is £10,000 could set me up for life. And like, for example, the Prime Minister is like, this is just spare change.
Yeah, it is
like different. It's the difference in the mindset is drastic.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not the same. It's not relatable. Yeah, I'm not saying that you have to have exactly the same experience as someone to be able to represent them. Like, elected representatives they can't be from exactly the same background as every single person they represent. That's not physically possible. But you can't claim to relate to someone when you just don't.
Yeah, and the thing is, nobody's blaming you from coming from a privileged background. People are blaming you because you're trying to act as if you're the average person. You are not the average person. Even if at once upon a time you were an average person, there's certain there's and then now that you're prime minister, you've got much more, monetary gains.
Yeah.
It's like acknowledge it. Even like, like for example, Rishi Sunak is such a like prime example for this conversation. Like you did not come from the like I don't know if his parents are immigrants, but I think they are. Like,
I think the interesting thing is that his family were clearly
well,
very invested in his development. Like he may have because he went to a private school, didn't he? I think
yeah,
he's an interesting person to think about. Because yes, his parents worked for the NHS. Yes, he worked in his family business growing up. That they're all very normal things to experience, and it makes him sound like he relates to people. But he did go to a private school. He had parents who were very supportive of his education and put everything they had in terms of their sacrifice. Sorry, I got a dog barking in the background. His parents put everything they had into his growth, and not everybody has that. So I think there's monetary wealth, and then do you want me to do this bit again? Because that is really noisy.
if you want to, because I could hear you
Yeah,
fine. I feel like I'm just thinking about the audience, and I feel like yeah, it would be too much sensory processing. Yeah, so yes, please.
yeah. Sorry, my what's happened is my little brother's just walked in the door and the dog started barking. I can tell that that's what must have happened because I can hear him saying hello, and I'm just like, okay, yeah. The Prime Minister's lucky enough to have parents who put every penny they had into his education, which gave him the opportunity to go to private school and to university. And it just shows that there are so many different ways one could be privileged. So, through their economic background or through their family background. And there are so many different ways that um, we're not all going to have the same experiences. We can't try and represent everybody, but we need to get better at noticing the little things that can have a massive impact on the opportunities somebody has. And if you are able to empathize with people who may have had to fight harder than others in life, don't then distance yourself from that when you get your big break and you're in a really powerful position. Take that with you, represent your community the whole way through.
And even if, like, at one point or the other, people are bound. People are bound to, in whether it's marriage or whether it's career, that like they will distance themselves from, their communities naturally. But just be like, yes, like I acknowledge your struggles. I don't even acknowledge it. I'm like, acknowledge it. That could be the first step. Acknowledge it and be like, I have gone to a different part of my life where I'm more successful. Therefore, I have, better economics. Sorry, did you hear that?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can't. Was there something else happening?
Oh, sirens. So I was just making
Oh,
sure.
no, it was fine. It didn't pick up actually.
Right. Better economic circumstances. However, I will see it as a different points of view, like different points of views, and try and understand or come close to understanding what it's like for the average person. We don't want you to be like, oh my God, I'm an authority. I'm giving up everything I have. Sorry, I just got restrained and it hurts. Like, that's not what's needed. Just understand that people are different from you. And also, going back to earlier, how we were speaking about like the ratio of young people to older people. So people under 16, there is 12.7 million of them. And for sorry, let me read you a different statistic. In 2021 census, it showed that 29.1% of people in England and Wales, that's 17.3 million people, were under 25, and 12 million, which is 20.2%, were aged 25 to 39, and then 40 to 59 is 15.6 million. And that even shows that the young people, everybody under the age of 25, meets literally half of the demographic, or a third, because this ends at 59, but like, yeah, a good third. And I'm like, how are we not having a say?
Yeah, well, UK Youth Parliament is all for votes at 16. I know that doesn't solve the whole problem, but as a national organisation, we're supportive of the Votes at 16 campaign. And I think it's important that if we as young people believe in that, we do show support for it, and try and gain allyship as well. So if we know older people who agree that actually the voting age should be lowered, they also speak out about it as well, because just it's that level of allyship as well. It's everyone was a young person once, and just because you reach an age where those issues don't apply to you anymore, it's even more important that you voice young people's concerns, because you are in a position now to vote. But then again, voting isn't everything, and there are other ways for us to make our voices heard. Not that voting isn't important, but I think it's about helping young people understand the other avenues to campaign that they have, so that they can hopefully gain the platform they deserve in the future.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you've just said. And you know what? The one I agree with, like 16-year-olds having a vote, but I'm just thinking about people that are coming from lower economic backgrounds. Because like at 16, people really don't have identifications. They might have letters and stuff like that, but like to even get a provisional, it's like £50.
Yeah, it's not accessible, is it? It's not equal. There needs to, with the voter ID, it's like we were saying earlier, it's if you're going to change the rules, you've got to think about all the people that's going to impact and give an accessible route to them, because provisional passport, and it's again, it's the lack of lived experience and positions of power, because if anybody who was making that decision to make that change had been in that situation, then that would have been bypassed, that would have been flagged up straight away as a potential issue. But if somebody's never been in a position where they don't own a passport or a driver's license, that's something that lots of adults will never have experienced, and it won't cross their minds that actually that's a barrier to a large group of people.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I feel like I feel like one of the things that I think schools should be doing is, you know, these mock collection things that you have. But I feel like it should be in the curriculum during each election period. I feel like it's I don't think that you should do local government, because not everybody's going to be from the same area or anything like that. So national elections, I feel like every school, every school or people who are not unable to vote because whether it's like, you know, the status in the UK and stuff like that, whatever it may be, a chance to do a mock election. The votes are all counted up, they're all recorded, and they're all sent back. And like there will be somebody who collects all these data and then feeds it back to, you know, central government.
Yeah, it is a source of research. It's about being creative about where we get our data from. And I think there's lots of opportunities for that in the curriculum. There are loads of places where young people are asked for their opinion and given sort of conversational activities to do. Those thoughts should be retained and they should be fed back. And then hopefully that would make young people feel more engaged in turn. The fact that the things that they say are taken seriously and fed back to somebody with the opportunity to do something about it, I think it'd have a massive impact.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
What are some of the most pressing issues facing the media industry today, and how can young people work to address them?
I think some of the most pressing things today are definitely to do with the cost of living crisis, because and the legacy of COVID, I guess, because what's unique to our generation is the things that we've been through in the past couple of years. And yes, of course, there have been harsh times in the past, and other generations have come through it and had a really successful life. But we've been faced with these unprecedented challenges in terms of all the places where we're supposed to feel safe, like our homes, like our schools. All of those places have been disrupted by what's been going on with our economy and our society generally. So I think the most challenging thing for us as young people is to try and find fresh answers to these problems that we've never seen before. And yes, not all of them can come from us. There are other people who need to be making decisions on our behalfs, because we don't control the budget, we don't control this or that. But our role in it is to make sure our lived experience gets across, and the solutions that are made involve that. So in terms of what we can do about it, I think any kind of youth voice group that you're part of, that's a brilliant first step. But trying to be visible as a young person who wants to get their opinion and their lived experience across. So talking about unprecedented challenges that no other generations had to deal with, we've also got unprecedented solutions, like the power of social media and all the other networks we have. It's interesting because social media can do so much damage to us and also help us so much. So I think that's a tool we need to support us to deal with all the issues facing us, a proper framework to use social media safely and in a way that isn't detrimental to our health, but also harnesses the power of being able to get a very small voice in front of a very big audience. But yeah, I think the main issues that are facing us are everywhere we spend our time, our mental health follows us around. So we need to deal with the mental health epidemic that we're facing, because we have been put in such a difficult situation, and of course that's had lots of impact on us, and we need to ensure that our education is functioning and serving us, because that will give us the tools to confront any challenge.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I feel like the unprecedented challenges come from one of, like, I feel like the biggest, biggest, or what am I saying? Let me restart. So I think I agree with you. One of the most pressing issues, which are linked to the unprecedented challenges that you're talking about, is facing the media industry today, as it's is one of the most pressing issues facing the media industry today, is the spread of misinformation. With the rise of social media and the online platforms, like you talked about, it's become easier for false information to circulate and mislead people. I feel like this can, like you said, have serious consequences on not just on somebody's mental health, but their public opinion, their decision making, and even democracy itself, which goes back to being part of, of the voices that inform our political decisions. And I think it's important to address these issues, because young people play such a crucial role. Like we talked about when we filmed the first half, there's nearly 50% of people who are young people in our country today. And people can actively engage in media literacy and critical thinking education to by developing those skills to analyze and evaluate information, so they can become really discerning consumers of media. That includes fact checking, verifying sources, and questioning the credibility of the information people encounter. But at the same time, one of the rights that young people have, children and young people, according to United Nations, is access to accurate information.
And it's like, that doesn't really happen. And also, young people can contribute like to creating and sharing accurate information as well. You know, we have access to digital platforms and social media presence to promote more reliable sources, share fact-checked content, and raise awareness about the importance of responsible media consumption, which I feel like our generation is good at, but also not as good as it should be. And it's like, you know, us young people, we have so much power to advocate for transparency and accountability in the media industry. And we can support these initiatives that promote ethical journalism, unbiased reporting, and fact-based storytelling. But by holding these like media organizations and journalists accountable for their actions, young people can like, you know, foster a more trustworthy and reliable media landscape. I think overall, addressing the issue of misinformation, it requires a collective effort from individuals, organizations, and society as a whole. And young people have the power to make significant impact by actively participating in media literacy or promoting accurate information and advocating for responsible media practices. But it's to just go do it. I feel like a lot of people will talk about it, but they won't go do it. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. We'll identify the problem, but we won't necessarily engage with the solution once it's been found. I'm so sorry. Can you bear with me just 2 seconds because I just need to confirm the room booking. I forgot to sign in and I'm going to get kicked out of my room if I don't sort this quickly. One moment. There we go, all sorted. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Do you want to finish off what you're saying?
No, I think that was it. I think I got to the end of it.
Oh, okay, that's great. But like, what do you think is the role of investigative journalism in promoting transparency and accountability in government and other institutions?
I think investigative journalism has to be in touch with its consumers, and I think that's difficult today because there are so many different audiences who want so many answers, and it's really difficult to there's so much of a balance which journalists are having to figure out, right, between all the different people who have already on the back of misinformation developed very different views about what's true and who to be skeptical of. And it's almost like good journalism has to already know what the truth is to be able to find it and present it to its audience. It's quite a philosophical thing because if journalists are going to support and sort of view themselves as servants of the public already have so many different views that they want to see confirmed or disproved, and it's almost like there's a lot of pressure on journalism to be kind of this pure form that holds the truth above all else, and that's not necessarily going to be what readers are looking for. You could have the most pure and unbiased information, but people aren't going to read it because they're going to want to confirm what they already think. So it's a really difficult balance. I think investigative journalism now has to be more ethical than ever before and understand the impacts of misinformation, and just I think there's so much risk and uncertainty in our society now. We've kind of got used to being skeptical of everything and trusting no one. And I think there's another role of journalism to try and build back a bit of faith and trust and credibility through the truth being transparent, because we've got to a stage where there's so much misinformation and lies and propaganda that it feels like we can never trust anything we read. But I think that climate will start to fall apart a little if we can get used to our new system where there's lots of different data sources and some of it will be correct and some of it isn't, and skilled journalists are able to guide us through that. It's almost like journalists in their service of readers are able to help their readers navigate the fact that not all the information they take in will be coming from journalists. it's very philosophical. I think it's interesting, sort of how we see truth in a multi-truth society.
Yeah, and I, even though that, I feel like investigative journalists, they have absolutely a crucial role in promoting transparency and accountabilities in governments and other institutions. But like you said, it does involve dedicated journalists who dig deep, uncover the hidden truth, and expose corruption and wrongdoing. But by conducting, the in-depth research, interviews, and analysis, I feel like it's important for them to bring light to important information that might otherwise remain hidden. Through their work, investigative journalists, they usually, I feel like a lot of people describe them as watchdogs, holding those in power accountable for their actions. That they investigate matters of public interest, such as political scandals, corporate misconduct, and human rights abuse. But that's happening in our country, all around the world. And I think it's important for them to shine light on these issues. They by ensuring those responsible are held accountable, and the public is informed of what's going on. Because this helps us make vital decisions, as it plays an extremely important role in maintaining a very healthy democracy. It empowers citizens by providing them with the information they need to make an informed conclusion and participate in the democratic processes. I feel like with investigative journalism, I feel like it gives people not what the gut is like. What how do I say this? Investigative journalists they have nothing to do with the government. They have nothing to do with news channels. They have nothing to do with anything like that, and they're sort of independent, which allows humans to be like, I'm open to looking at this. It's not filtered. It's not being gone through 500 different people for it to air and be like, oh, take this out, add this in. And I think it gives a voice to the voiceless. It brings attention to marginalized community, exposes injustices, and advocates for positive change. And it amplifying the stories, experiences of those who may not have the means or opportunity to speak out. Investigative journalism helps to create a more equitable and inclusive society. Just to summarize, I feel like investigative journalism is essential for promoting transparency and accountability, as well as social justice, which is one of the biggest things. And it uncovers hidden truths, holds those people in power accountable, empowers citizens, and advocates for positive change.
Definitely.
And I feel like it's a vital role for democracy, and is a catalyst for creating a better world. But again, like you said, there are some ethical considerations that journalists and commentators must take into account when reporting on sensitive issues. What do you think some of them are as a journalist?
I think especially young readers or anybody who I guess we talk about young people being particularly vulnerable to misinformation, but we'll all know people in loads of different groups in society that we've come across who when you just listen to someone talk and you think, where on earth have you heard that from? And you also think nothing is ever going to change their mind. So I think one of the primary ethical concerns for journalists is making sure that they know that there will be portions of their audience who take their word as the absolute gospel. They will take a journalist's they will take it very seriously, and they may take certain segments of what's said out of context. So I think it's knowing the impact that information, or especially in terms of opinion and analysis, when people comment on society or groups in society or events, that some people will completely regurgitate that, whether it's in the way that you meant it or not. And I'm not comparing figures like, for example, Andrew Tate to reputable journalists, because they're not the same thing, but it's this example of somebody who has a large following and some people really like the perspective they take, And then no matter what the original intention of what he said was, because, for example, Andrew Tate, he will then go on an interview where he's being grilled for something he said, and then accused of having this effect on the population of young boys, and he'll say, that wasn't my intention, it was a joke, it was this. What people like that then need to do is take responsibility for the fact that they may have been taken out of context, or what they said may have been misrepresented, but they were still the catalyst for that effect. So I think the main ethical consideration is to know quite how much of a cultural impact something you said taken out of context can have, and take responsibility for when your audience hears something wrong and then starts developing a culture that you no longer agree with, stepping out against that, because that's your position. That's one of your main responsibilities as a role model and as a journalist who is attached to the truth and that kind of ethical, honorable pursuit, right? It's being able to challenge your own audience when you think that they are taking something the wrong way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like people, like, you know, the basic things that I feel like people like journalists and commentators must consider is ethical, must consider, like, under the bracket of ethical considerations are respecting privacy, avoiding harm, and maintaining accuracy and ensuring its fairness. Because I feel like respecting privacy is such a basic human right that it often gets forgotten about. That makes sense. I feel like it's in being mindful of individuals' rights and not intruding into their personal lives without a compelling public interest, with a genuine reason, and like avoiding harm involves minimizing the potential negative impact that the reporting on individual communities may have. Maintaining accuracy is crucial, you know, to provide truthful information and avoid spreading misinformation. But as humans, you know, we tend to be biased. But to remember that this information is going to go out to hundreds of thousands of people and is access to billions of people around the world. And maintaining the accuracy. Sorry?
I was going to say, I feel like one of the key things is knowing that if somebody gets to a point where they're being harassed and their privacy is eroded, even if they were originally in the wrong, so thinking about people who, people in positions of power or visible people, celebrities is a good example, who have been called out for something that they've done that was wrong. They've been called out by journalism, and then that journalism has what was originally sort of an expose of this inappropriate thing that somebody had did. There's public outcry, and then that evolves into harassment of that person, and that's a really difficult ethical boundary to consider, because to what extent should that person have thought before they spoke? To what extent, what is considered a valid or an appropriate apology? So when do you stop harassing somebody for something that they've done wrong? And also knowing that the more hatred that is generated towards this person who has made a mistake, even if that mistake was very serious and their apology isn't enough of a response, they are going to be numbed to that criticism and to that scrutiny. Because if somebody in a position of power becomes accustomed to the fact that large groups of the population hate them, they'll stop listening to the criticisms of that group of the population. They'll just stop caring. It's like what we see with politicians. They don't care that 50% of the country thinks they're ruining their lives, partly because that's how our political system works. It's almost like 50% of the population will always disagree with the rule, which is an interesting question in itself, but also because when you're receiving constant abuse and criticism from a very large group of people, you kind of become immune to it and shut it out. And I feel like people would take, hopefully, in an ideal world, people would take criticism and scrutiny more seriously if it was potentially less of a barrage of hatred and more of a specific criticism. But that is a very academic and idealistic way of seeing public figures, which will probably never happen.
I feel like a lot of people, like, when you're determining the public, like a public figure's, apologies are enough, like it's subjective and it all depends on various factors. I've noticed sort of like, when things like Black Lives Matter is like, there'll be like a good like group, like a good number of people from the Black community that'll be like, that apology is fine, we'll accept it, but just don't do it again. And then there's people who are not Black who will be like, no, this is a massive issue, this apology is not enough. And it's like, it's just like finding the whole like balance. I feel like, and also, is it your position to be offended? It's different when we call somebody out, but is it are you in a position to have the right to be offended? Is that apology for you, or is it for somebody else?
Yes, exactly. It depends on the level of harm, whether that apology is appropriate and accepted. If you've experienced harm because of what was said, then it is your position to decide whether you accept that or not. And if you didn't, you can be part of the movement to get that apology out of somebody, but you're not in a position to judge whether it was enough. And then it's things like obviously this has been going on for a long time, but we've seen the rise of what do they call it? The wokerati, like the way sort of centre-right, primarily politicians talking about they've branded and created a caricature of primarily a young quote-unquote woke person who is stupid and just cares about like it's a sort of negative image of an activist which the right have conjured to refer to a group in the left. And I think what I'm trying to say, sorry,
what is it called?
I don't know, they call it like I think it's a Suella Braverman quote, the tofu eating wokerati. I think that's one thing she said. I may be misquoting that, it's me propagating misinformation as well, but this is the quote that I think was said. Basically, there's a caricature of a leftist young activist who hates the right for no apparent reason, and then the right stop listening to them. So if anybody ever makes any criticism of, say, for example, border enforcement policy, and somebody says it's inhumane for you to treat migrant populations like that, and they'll say, oh, it's the woke people again, they would rather let everybody into the country and they're this and they're that. And I feel like when we get too polarized, or we get very polarized, people stop listening to the logical arguments of a large group of the population because they just get branded with this stupid caricature, and people stop listening to these very valid arguments about humaneness. And it's really difficult when people split into sides, and I feel like that's an issue journalism has to face when journalists get split into two separate camps of we believe this, we believe that. There's no nuance anymore. It stops being intelligent, it stops being thought-provoking, and it doesn't actually have an impact anymore.
Yeah, so I've just searched it up. She said it's the Guardian reading tofu eating wokerati, whatever it's called. And she said Suella Braverman said I think it was in the House of Commons that she said that in.
Yeah, I believe so. So yeah, it's that reference to that young activisty leftist group who she no longer accepts the opinions of, and it's easy to brand any kind of criticism of the Conservative Party as being one of the Guardian reading tofu eating wokerati rather than actually listening to what they have to say. Yes, that polarization.
Also, she continued by saying, she said, the Labour Party, Lib Dems and Guardian reading permits eco-protest. And she's also said comments came as Just Stop Oil protesters were arrested on Dartford Crossing. So I think that's a major road link between Essex and Kent that was kept closed due to safety fears. And I feel like that she said that for effectively preventing police from arresting eco zealots who have caused mayhem and misery during weeks of protest. And that's what the Daily Mail says. And it was, yeah.
Which is a perfect example of the challenges facing journalism. You either read the Mail or you read the Guardian, and you have to pick a side, and nobody cares what the other side has to say. It's divided the population, and there's no room for intelligent, investigative journalism. And this is the media landscape we have to look at now.
I feel like the one thing that I'm just thinking about whilst doing this is it's quite disgusting. Because I'm like, no matter, as a politician, I strongly believe, no, not me as a politician, I feel like a politician should be, whether they're in your party or not, it does not matter. You should be open to everybody's opinion. Because you're in a party, it doesn't stop you from exploring other avenues or other people's perspectives. And it's an important approach, discussions with respect and empathy for all different perspectives. It's understandable that there may be concerns about the impact of the protest, but it's essential to remember that, peaceful demonstrations, if they're peaceful, then, it's a fundamental part of democratic societies. But when it, oh, no, actually, I don't want to say that. Actually, no.
I think it's interesting because lots of people will say that young people are very passionate and have picked a side, and young people have very extreme views, which is true in lots of contexts. But I think politically, the young people I speak to either are completely undecided in their political opinion because they haven't had any political education, or the political young people I do know, yes, there are some people who take quite a strong party line, and that's fine. We're all in our current system, we're always going to need people like that to make it run. But a lot of the people I've spoken to, which seems to be the line this conversation is going in, have views, but they're mainly based on morality rather than any particular school of thought, and it's quite logical and accepting of different viewpoints and quite almost academic in its approach to politics. And I think people have got young voters quite wrong, in the sense that people think that, we're not going to lower the voting age. We get told we're not going to lower the voting age to 16, and we get told, that's because they're worried that everyone's going to vote for the far left if we bring in young voters, which actually I think would be quite unlikely because there's just as many far right young people as far left young people. But anyway, I think the vast majority would have absolutely no idea who to vote for because they've had no education. And most of the young people I know who are involved in politics are very neutral and don't really know who to vote for either. It comes down to policy. And I think if that tells us anything, it's that people need to stop panicking about the impact younger generations are going to have on the votership, because at this stage, nobody's voting at all. And instead start giving us the tools to think about politics at a younger age. And there is no point trying to keep young people out of the polling booths, which is what I think we've been seeing. That doesn't need any more work. I think what we do need is to try and get young people in there, and then you can think about trying to get them to pick a party line, because that's how it works here. But that's not the number one priority. It's trying to get young people to have an opinion at all.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You said it perfectly. I feel like without the political education that is very much needed for young people, there's a variety of young people. Some may be well informed and actively engaged, whilst others may have a limited exposure to political topics. And it's such a fucking taboo.
Like, it shouldn't be, because encouraging these inclusive and accessible platforms for political education can help ensure that all young people have the opportunity to develop a comprehensive understanding of politics and participate in shaping their communities. And they aren't enabled to do that if they're not given the resources to. And like, you know what? And it also, like, if we're going to bring it back to mental health, political decisions that affect young people and mental health are crucial to address. And it's important to advocate for policies that prioritize mental health support and resources for young individuals by increasing funding mental health services in school, implementing comprehensive mental health education, and reducing the stigma surrounding mental health. We can create a more supportive environment for young people. If people are given the tools to educate, they can vote for the parties that they feel that are able to put that sort of stuff in place. It kind of makes a full circle. But I feel like you're unable to do that if you don't have accurate information, you are not taught about politics, you don't know how it works, and you just get a piece of paper in the post saying that you have to vote.
Yeah, and coming back to our discussion about the biggest issues facing young people today, if we talk about education, the economy, and mental health and social media, for example, those four big things which we've spoken a lot about, all of them are so linked, and mental health support and fixing the economy and giving young people opportunities will reduce political radicalism. It is as basic as that, in that, for example, if more young men feel like they've got the mental health support they need, they'll be less likely to try and find ways around it on social media and potentially get taken to the wrong corners of our internet. And if young people who will classify themselves as far leftists and have quite extreme views about economic policy, they wouldn't be desiring change if our economy was serving them. So I think we need to come back to the fact that whenever something happens in politics with young people that politicians don't like, it's actually negative feedback, and it's actually telling them they're not doing enough for young people. And I think it should be less a focus on, are young people having a crisis and we need to hone down on them and try and take away social media and try and stop them from voting and putting misinformation into the political system, and instead focusing on the fact that young people are paying a lot of attention to the world around them. And the reason extremist views are developing is because they know that the world around them wasn't built for them, and it's not going to serve them unless they see change.
That's absolutely valid, because, funding, for example, the government decisions on mental health funding can impact the availability and the quality of the service. And then when you think about that access to care, laws and policies can determine how easily individuals can access mental health support and treatment. And then when it comes to social support, political initiatives can shape the level of social support available for those with mental health challenges. And then stigma reduction, like legislation and campaigns, can help reduce the stigma surrounding mental health and promote a more supportive environment. And it's just like, these are just a few examples about there are many ways in which UK politics can influence mental health, education, the economy. And it's important for people to be educated at schools about, politics and how to gain further understanding about the parties involved. And it should be in the curriculum.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if people are saying we don't have the tools to try and give people that neutral education, it's like, when you leave a meeting and you feel like we've just come up with a list of problems and no solutions, it feels like the entire politics at the moment is a meeting like that. We are identifying problem after problem after problem, and I don't see any hope of solutions being offered. And I think that falls on us as young people as well. I think we know inside out what the problems facing us are, but what we're not able to do is offer recommendations. And I think that's one of the most important tools our education and our other work experience can offer us, is being able to take a problem and convert it into a solution. That's what's going to make us effective leaders of the future.
And like, for example, I'm going to keep bringing it back to mental health because, that's really important. Everybody goes through that.
I feel like, like recent UK policies and laws have focused on, like, improving mental health support and resources. Like, for example, the Mental Health Act, right, 2022, aims to enhance patient rights and increase access to community-based care. Additionally, the NHS long-term plan prioritize mental health services, including the expansion of crisis care, the establishment of mental health support teams in schools. And these policies demonstrate a commitment to addressing mental health difficulties and promoting well-being. And it's best, that we learn about how everything links up. Do you mind if we go to talk about about mental health difficulties?
Yeah, of course, that's fine.
Like, for you, or for the people that you know, what are some of the most effective self-care practices for maintaining mental health, and how can individuals make these practices a part of their daily routine?
I think, sorry to be quite broad, but I think one of the most important things from a self-care perspective is to actually believe that self-care is something we deserve. And I think that's the hardest thing for me and the hardest thing for most of the young people who I work with, being able to see self-care and practicing self-care as a priority and as something that we deserve. That was definitely my issue with when I was struggling with my eating disorder, and when I still do. I kind of lose sight of why it's important to take care of myself and see myself as something different to a human being or less than a human being. And for me, what tends to put it back into perspective, which isn't the healthiest thing, and I'm sure I'll find a better way of doing this throughout life, but I always kickstart my self-care when I start noticing my mental health having an impact on my work. And it usually starts off as quite negative, as, oh, you'll be even more useless if you can't sort out your work. And then as soon as I start getting healthier, I'm able to see that in itself was a manifestation of what I was going through. But I think that's the key thing. We need to recognize that we are worthy of health. We deserve health. We have a right to it. And some of the things that will help keep us healthy are things that we can actually do for ourselves. And I think a lot of the things that we need to stay healthy are outside our control, and it falls to us when we are in a position where we're feeling well and productive to campaign for that. But in terms of things that we do have control over, I think one of the best things we could be taught as young people is how to manage our time and how to see rest as something essential and self-care is something essential. So when we're planning our diaries and we're trying to fit in as much as we can and be productive, this is like an essential item which we have to build in, and we may have to put in more rest than we think we did. So sort of being in tune with ourselves and knowing, you might think, oh, I slept 8 hours last night, or oh, I've eaten 3 meals today, how come I've still got no energy? Sometimes we need more. That's okay. We're all different. Sometimes other people will need more or less than you, and you can't compare yourself to them. My problem is I managed to convince myself that I need less than other people, and I can get by on 2 hours sleep, and I can get by listening to my eating disorder. And it's not true. Your body knows better than your brain sometimes. I think it's really important to spend time with people who know you well and who care about you, because they will tell you the stuff that you don't want to hear. And they'll notice when it's getting bad and you're not yourself. But beyond rest, what we can do to look after ourselves, I think really knowing what we like doing and what's difficult for us, and trying to limit the things that are difficult for us, but still keep a little bit in it, because our anxiety will increase if we don't challenge it sometimes. I say to people a lot, if I didn't do everything I was scared of, I would never do anything. I would have cancelled this call because before I met you, I would have been worried about meeting a new person. I wouldn't be at work because I'd be stressed about my job. I wouldn't have got out of bed because I'd been worried about this, that, the other. So it's good to have a little bit of challenge, but limited, so you're not pushing yourself too far. and really know what you like. So if I was feeling like crap, I need to have like a Rolodex in my head of things that I know will make me feel better, and they'll be different on different days. But seeing yourself as worthy of your time and someone you want to get to know, I think that is the only advice that's general enough for everyone that I could offer about self-care, because it really is about knowing who you are, how much you can take, what's the right level of challenge, and what makes you happy.
That's so lovely. For me, I'm just thinking about a Ben and Jerry's cookie dough ice cream, the whole tub as well.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
mental health, who? It's all back.
Yes.
I love Ben and Jerry's cookie dough. Do you like Ben and Jerry's?
I love Ben and Jerry's, and I think for me, like sleep is a massive thing. Like, yes, I do have my comfort foods, but just like Sundays, if I feel like I need an extra 10 minutes in bed and I've got somewhere to be, the panic and the structure in my head tells me it just feels really wrong. You know, when you've got you know, when something feels immoral and everything in you is screaming that this isn't right, this isn't right. Sometimes some of us get that about really illogical times, don't we? Like something feels morally wrong when actually it's just a completely normal thing to do, and it's sort of giving yourself the space to question that. So if having a snack feels morally wrong, or if just not doing anything and actually you've got nowhere to be and you feel like you should be being productive, if sitting around doing nothing feels morally wrong, let yourself question that, because if it's irrational, it's probably a manifestation of your own mental health.
Definitely. Can I be honest with you? With me, it's like my productivity level is high. My productivity level is higher than the average person. And like I can do as much as an average person can do when they're fully like productive. They're doing one thing after the other and it's all going perfectly. They're like they have still they're like way beyond schedule. And for me, I'll be like, oh my God, I've done absolutely nothing today. I have absolutely fucked up. Where is the time going? Because I can't do as much as I usually do. It's a lot what I do. That's what I get told. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. And I feel like, no, nothing you could say isn't. But like sometimes we're gonna all have like a slow day. If sometimes I want to watch Sherlock Holmes and see Benedict Cumberbatch,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes I want to see Benedict Cumberbatch play Sherlock Holmes. And and you know, I want my Ben and Jerry's and I want some things. Like it's just I feel like one thing that I need to learn. So I need to be patient with myself. I expect too much of myself. I've been told that. I don't worry. But if everybody's telling you that, there's probably some truth in that. Like I just need to take a step back and be like, no, I'm not going to do anything today. Not every day has to be work, work, work.
Yeah,
Not
exactly.
everything has to be about other people. Sometimes it's about me. And you know, that's absolutely okay. And you deserved today's like it's not like you deserve to just have something for yourself. If you need a whole day for yourself, you deserve it. Like I feel like we're so like I'm just like I want it. I will have it if I deserve it. And the one thing I do is my autism doesn't help because the lack of leptin. I don't feel hunger, so it's like, or if somebody says I need to eat, I'll be like, okay, I'll do all these tasks and then I'll reward myself with food. I will do all these tasks and then I'll log off. Like it's not like that. It's a basic thing that you need to function. So close that laptop and just go. Nobody's gonna die because you're not doing the work. And also, like the one thing that I do that I'm very, very good at, which is a lot of people struggle with it, but I'm really grateful that I'm really good at this. That sounds really arrogant.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's self-aware.
Yeah, I like when I like had a really big crisis where restraint is involved, police are involved, any type of crisis, no matter how small it is, how big it is. Doesn't matter if I try to kill myself or try to self-harm, everything. I just be like, okay, so what now? What now? Where are we going from here? This has happened. I can't take it back. I'm distressed. Yes, I might get some like, people worried about me and giving me consequences, like taking back my free time or something like that. But who cares? I'm gonna get it back because I feel like for me, it's like I can feel a few days where I'm just like, dude. But I still go to therapy twice a week. I still like try and attempt to do education once a week. Do the podcast, do everything. This world is going to go at my own pace. The world is still going to be moving on, so I need to keep moving on. But if I need to pause my world, I can pause my world.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
don't like after I get distressed or something, I'm like, okay, great. So I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back. Like even like today, like I haven't attempted to kill myself in 2 weeks. Great. That's gonna somehow in life I'm gonna get rewarded, whether it's my free time is gonna increase or get more opportunities or and I haven't self-harmed in 51 days. That's great. That's going to allow people who are in my network to feel much more secure about me doing independent
Yeah.
stuff. Life goes at your own pace. I'm 18. I'm still doing my GCSEs. No, I'm not 18. I'm 18 next month. But get the idea. I'm still doing my GCSEs. I'm getting my shit together, but I'm getting my shit together at my own pace. The world goes at your own pace. The world is at your hands. I feel like
Yeah.
I've really got really passionate there.
As you should, though. The amount of people who need to hear that. And I think what I really struggle is when I feel like I've let somebody else down. Like the stuff that's my control, I can forgive myself for not keeping up with it. And I can quite easily reset, but I struggle to reset when I feel like I've let someone else down or when I feel like something irreparable's happened, especially professionally, because I think I said that I struggle with depression and sometimes I'll go through periods of time where I just don't know where the time went and I've left something sitting for too long and someone doesn't want to work with me anymore. And I've gotten better at forgiving myself for it and just going, it wasn't you at that time. And had you been your normal self, you would of course stayed on top of it, but you weren't present. But it does hurt a bit to see when something like irreparable has happened. But then that's where sort of like long-term thinking and all of that comes in. Sometimes there isn't a solution to a problem that happened or something that you lost when you were struggling. But that doesn't mean that it's going to have a massive impact on your future or your future trajectory or your work. Maybe that project is going to have to look a bit different, or maybe that project's just going to have to get put aside and you're going to get on with something else. But I think that's an important thing to learn in life, that not everything that we lose is going to come back, but that doesn't mean we're not going to have something equally good. Some things may never be replaced, but that doesn't mean that that has to hurt us forever. It's the same with people, it's the same with projects that we may have lost contact with or things that may have disappeared from our lives when we were struggling. It may be irreplaceable, but that doesn't mean that our long-term quality of life has to be affected by it. And there are some things that other people will never understand, like some of the successes you were talking about. Some people will never understand what it feels like to be counting the number of days since you self-harm. Some people will never understand that. And I know that some people will never understand what it's like to, when I say I wasn't there at that time or that wasn't me at that time, that's the vocabulary I use to talk about a period of time where I was depressed or I was really struggling with my mood or something like that. Some people don't know what that means. Some people who may have had a similar experience won't know what I mean by that. They'll understand it, but they won't understand it in as many words. And it's just like there are going to be some things we experience that we can't communicate. And that's why one of the most important relationships we can ever have is with ourselves, and just knowing that if I understand what I mean, sometimes that's enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, yes. Oh my God, I'm blown away. I feel like, like if you look at my phone right now, it's like, oh my God, apparently I don't know that my screen on blur. You can see,
Right.
oh, let me just go like that. 15, 23 hours, it keeps like a detailed track. And I'm like, it's, this app, do you have the app?
No, I don't.
This app takes up so much space, right? But no matter what, the app doesn't get deleted. All my social media is more likely to get deleted than this app. Because sometimes there's this thing that you can do where you can, it's kind of mandatory to at least write one to why are you doing this? Why are you keeping track? And then there is a place that says, where is it? Oh, sorry. Okay. It's like why I'm doing this. Like, and then when you read them, because you don't read it often, it's like one of mine is, I don't know. I do not deserve to be abused. It's unacceptable that other people abuse me, and it's unacceptable for me to abuse myself as well. Something like that, and you don't see it often because you're just like, the app's in the background, but you're like, yeah, I now remember what I did this for. I feel like it's important to understand why you're on this journey and what you want from it and what you don't want from it, especially.
I think that's I don't know whether it's technically self-care, but it's an important thing to do if you know that you've got a long-term conversation with your mental health, to find a way of keeping record of different points in that makes sense to you. I definitely like to write things, and I do a bit of songwriting. I used to write songs a lot when I was younger, and now I don't really do music anymore, but I still enjoy just putting down lyrics sometimes. Or I'll just do like a little word vomit into my notes. And sometimes it's because I kind of don't really talk to people about my feelings when I'm struggling, because I tend to just disassociate when that happens. If I try and explain, then I get too deep inside my own head, and it's better for me to use my time with others to get out of my brain. But when I'm doing well and I'm trying to explain to somebody what it's like to feel like that, I can just look back at some of those notes, and it's kind of like a little view into what was going on in my brain at that point. And that also helps me forgive myself for sort of long-term impact things. Like I was just saying, like if I feel like I've dropped something at work, or I've lost track of something, and I realised that period of absence had a long-term impact on even my relationships. Maybe there was a friend who needed me and I couldn't be there for them at that time, and I'm now trying to get back in touch with that person, and I can't understand why they're not responding to me. And then I think, for God's sake, and I've tried a little bit to keep up that relationship, I've now lost that person forever because I couldn't be there when they needed it. And then I'll go back and read some of what I was thinking at the time, and I'll just be like, I was in no position to help somebody else. Like, this is an irreversible thing, and I don't know how I'm going to fix it. Maybe I never will, but I can't blame myself for it.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, do you want to take a 15-minute break?
I'm all right. Would that help you?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it then. That's fine. I've got to head off at 4 because I have to go to work, but I'm fine to take a bit of a break.
Because I feel like we both need it. We went for an hour.
It
That's
did.
why I wouldn't do a 15. I would usually do a 10, but we have time. So
Awesome.
thank you. So we'll reconvene in at 20 past.
Yeah, sounds good. Are you gonna jump off the call and then come back on? Okay,
I'm just gonna. So
just before we, took a break, I think I'm going to clarify what dissociation is, and then we'll move on to the next question. Sounds good?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, do you like me to? What do you mean you will?
I would just explain what dissociation is, and then we'll
Cool.
just move to the next question.
Sounds
So,
good.
for those who don't know what dissociation is, it refers to a psychological experience where individuals may feel disconnected from their thoughts, emotions, or surroundings. And this can involve a sense of detachment, numbness, or feeling like an observer of one's own emotion. Dissociation, for those who don't know, refers to a psychological experience where individuals may feel disconnected from their thoughts, emotions, or surroundings. It can involve a sense of detachment, numbness, or feeling like an observer of one's own experiences. Dissociation can occur in response to trauma, stress, or as a coping mechanism. And if you go through this, it's important to seek professional help because it is quite life-changing to have dissociation. Somebody with a dissociative disorder, I can confirm. We've talked about systematic, issues. What do you think the impact is of systematic issues such as poverty, racism, and inequality on mental health, and how can we work to address these issues?
It affects your entire journey with mental health from the development and the things that may, so obviously some mental health conditions and problems develop before we're even born, and those will be impacted by systemic issues. There's lots of evidence talking about sort of different identities we may have, and our genetics might make us predisposed to different things. And then once we're born, the experiences we have in our childhood may make us more or less likely to develop different mental health problems. And also our ability to cope with them for ourselves, the coping mechanisms we develop in terms of, there's some evidence, it's being questioned now, but about different parenting styles in different communities that may have affected the way we're able to think and interrogate our own emotions. Some of us may have been given the tools by our parents to cope with things, and some of us may not have. And that all comes down to systemic problems and just differences as well. And then if we do start to struggle with our mental health, some people will feel more validated than others because they'll have seen the stories of people who look like them, live like them, who are struggling with similar things. And for some people, they won't see themselves reflected in the media like that because they tend to be quite stereotypical characters who we see in terms of mental health journeys. In the work I've done around eating disorders, obviously not everybody with an eating disorder is a teenage skinny white girl, but that tends to be what we see. So it depends. We may notice that we're struggling with our mental health or be able to identify that earlier if we've seen people who have a similar identity to us in the public eye. And then in terms of our access to support, so some mental health resources will be expensive, or in terms of the amount of time that we have or flexibility that we have in our work. So people who are in working class jobs will less likely to be able to manage appointments around their working day. Their boss will be less appreciative of them as a person and won't allow them to take time for themselves. And the kind of schools we go to as well. A lot of that comes down to level of resource that we have throughout our life in all the different spaces we move through. The less money you have, the more likely you are to experience systemic barriers to mental health support and to good mental health. So I think it's important that we're aware of that, especially since a lot of us once we begin if it's something we can recover from, we begin our recovery journey. So when we start to focus on our mental health struggles and get to know them better, we get like a chip on our shoulder, and we get kind of a will to fight for our communities of people who struggle with the same things. And understanding systemic inequalities is so important to that. So with eating disorders, for me, it's very connected to the way that I see feminism. Obviously, not everybody who struggles with an eating disorder is a woman or identifies as a woman, but again, feminism isn't just for women. And I see the idea of things being negative body image being branded with femininity is something I get very angry about and was definitely vulnerable to. And in terms of that sort of culture and not being good enough, that definitely comes from some of the identities I have and some of the rest of us have. So I think understanding systemic inequality gives us that will to fight when we're in a good place on a more campaigning and level. And also in terms of our own recovery, we may feel robbed and cheated, and sometimes that can motivate us in our personal recoveries as well. I think the more about eating disorders and some of the ways that they are branded towards people like me and sold to people like me in a sort of anti-capitalist perspective, that made me angry and that made me more committed to my own recovery. So it's really important to understand, and it's really important that we know the deepest details of it through lived experience. So it's a well-known fact that systemic inequalities contribute to mental health problems, but only the people who have been in that position will know inside out the specifics of how that affects us, and on a operational level, what the response and change needs to look like. So if we are in a position to do so, making our lived experience known.
Yeah. And I feel like, trauma and, adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, have a profound impact on, mental health, which leads, to a increased risk on mental health disorders, such as, anxiety, depression, PTSD, CPTSD, and can also, affect your physical health. And to prevent and address these issues, it's important to address these issues, as it's crucial. To prevent and address these issues, it's crucial, to prioritize early intervention, providing trauma-informed care, and creating supportive environments. And this includes implementing policies that address social determinants of health, promoting access to mental health services, and supporting individuals and communities affected by mental health. Together we can work together to create a healing and resilience. And you know what, to kind of round it up, that's what My Trauma is Chronic but I'm Iconic's about. What are some of the key takeaways or messages that you hope listeners will gain from our conversation throughout this whole podcast?
I hope listeners will understand that they have a lot of power to create change, and they also have a lot of responsibility to listen to themselves and work within their capacity, because it's very easy for people who want to inspire young people to get involved in decision making and politics to say the future's in your hands and thrust a lot of responsibility onto young people, and we're not going to be effective leaders if we haven't spent time developing the tools to maintain good mental health, to maintain strong relationships with other people in our communities, all those things which get thrust to the side if we get swept into hustle culture. So I think I would want young people to understand the potential they have, and also some of the more off the beaten track things they may have to do to realize that potential. It's not all about working as hard as you can. It's about the people around you. It's about your relationship with yourself. Think about the long term.
How can people get involved in the causes and issues that you are working on? And what are some of the ways that they can make a positive impact in their own communities?
So I'll always shout about UK Youth Parliament. They do brilliant work in terms of giving young people the opportunity to get in decision-making rooms and have the tools to do it confidently. So find out who your youth MP is, ask them for their advice, and if you don't have one, try and get that seat funded and run for it. There are elections taking place in lots of local authorities next year, so depending on when this comes out, see what's going on with your election timeline, and you will usually have a local youth council. It depends on the financial situation of your local authority, because youth services are one of the things that get thrown in the bin when people are short of money, and we see that in Peterborough. I'm going to have to keep my voice down because I'm sat in the Peterborough City Council offices right now, but youth services get done dirty when we are short of money. But then again, that's another campaign opportunity. If the services you need to get involved don't exist, you're going to have to work harder to build the infrastructure, but that's something in itself to fight for. That's important to me, and I think is important to lots of us. In terms of some of the other issues that I spend lots of time working on, anything based in a school, it's really important that we have good student voice systems in our school. So if you have a student council and it's good, that's a good place to start. If you don't have a student council or it doesn't work, try and find the right people to make something effective, because infrastructure is such a big part. If we have the right systems in place, all we have to do is use them. It's a little bit harder if you're not part of an institution like a school or a college or a workplace, because it's always easiest to organise with other people, and when you're on your own it's harder to make an impact. But choose work that's meaningful to you is one of the best pieces of advice I can give. Some of us, we will always have money jobs, especially if you're coming from a position where you have to keep the money coming in. We'll all spend time doing things that aren't particularly meaningful to us because we need a paycheck, and we're very lucky if we don't. But make sure you spend some of your time doing things that are meaningful to you. And if you can do that in your work life, great, because we all have to work. And if you can make change and get paid for it, awesome. And I think in terms of economic change, vote, because a lot of our economy comes down to the budget and who's in Westminster, so vote. And if you don't know how to vote, read, research, speak to anyone and everyone you can about their views, so you've got a diverse bit of information coming in. And I think that is the most key thing that people can do to get involved is find what you're interested in, find the issues that are important to you, and just hop online and do a bit of research of campaign groups in your local area or youth groups in your local area, or get in touch with your local council, find out who a youth worker is who can help signpost you. I work very closely with my youth worker, and she knows everything. So I think definitely find a youth worker, and I'm always available to answer questions or signpost people to anything. So get in touch with me. I am on Instagram. I am at Eva Lindy Woods on Instagram. I'm at Eva Woods NYP on Twitter. If you look me up on LinkedIn, I'm sure I will show up, and my email address is everywhere as well. So if you've got anything specific and aren't sure where to start, I can support.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners today?
I'm guessing if you're listening to a podcast with a name like this, it's because you spend a lot of time thinking about your identity and the struggles you may have had and how that impacts who you are today. So be proud of that and spend time on it, because it is important. Whatever traumas you may be carrying with you, whatever you may have experienced that's built your identity today, that is always a strength. You will always have experience that nobody else has, or a perspective that nobody else has. So keep living the name of this podcast in your everyday life, because it's a really important mantra to have in your head.
Oh, thank you. And finally, this is one question that we end with in every podcast. What's one thing that you're grateful for today?
Today, I am grateful for public transport because I think I'm grateful for it because as a young person who can't afford a car, I don't know how I would get around otherwise. And also, I feel like it is a lot of potential for how we can work as a community to better look after the planet. And it just, I don't know, it just really sticks out to me as something that we all share and brings people together and has a lot of potential in terms of political and economic change as well. So that's just a really random thing that I feel grateful for. But when I didn't have long to think about that question, that was what popped into my head. I'm very grateful for it.
Thank you so much for joining us today and the day before. Eva, it's been a pleasure to learn more about your work as a member of Youth Parliament for Peterborough, a charity trustee, writer and commentator. Your dedication to social change and community engagement is truly inspiring. And I'm not even just saying that. And we appreciate your willingness to share your insights and experiences with us. Wish you all the best in your future endeavours, and we look forward to following your continued success. Thank you again for all the work that you've done to make this podcast happen.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been an absolute pleasure.